Okay, welcome back. Please forgive our tardiness, and now I'll turn it over to Mr. Guard.
Thank you. Chair Boehne, members of the Commission, my name is Hal Guard. I am the Administrator of the Rail and Public Transit Division for the Oregon Department of Transportation. I know we are behind schedule, and we will try to make this quick, but I don't want to lose any substance. I was going to tee up the introduction of our request to release the Public Transportation Plan out for public comment. However, our chair of the plan provided a nice little introduction, and I'm going to let him introduce it as opposed to me. It's just my voice. It's Commissioner Lohman's word. So, dear Transportation Commissioners, as you know, I've been serving as chair of a policy advisory committee established to develop a new long-range modal plan for public transportation in Oregon. Public Transportation Plan for your review at the May 17th OTC meeting is a product of extensive, thoughtful deliberation by a dedicated, very active policy advisory committee. The draft plan is informed by experience-based insights from transit providers and riders, local elected officials and transportation planners, as well as public health officials and active transportation advocates. I wish I could be present at your May 17 meeting to amend this draft to you for release to the public to solicit broad examination of its concepts and commitments. On the 17th, however, I'll be flying out to attend my son's college graduation. That's a good excuse. I urge the Commission to approve releasing the draft Oregon Public Transportation Plan for public review, but I also hope you will take time yourselves to make sure it provides useful guidance for future support for the various forms of public transportation, a mode whose significance in the overall transportation system is bound to increase dramatically over the next 20 to 30 years. Dave Lohman.
Well, let me just take a moment to thank retired Commissioner Lohman for his dedication and commitment to this agency and to the work. I will be accepting this only as a rain check, so should he watch this portion of the video, that we would like to see him again and be able to thank him for his hard work and dedication to this and so many other things. He has an open invitation to drop by anytime, but that is a rain check that we'll be taking. So thank you for that, Mr. Guard.
How does the guy manage to use his 3 minutes when he's not even here?
It's masterful.
With that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Ruck.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Hal. Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name, for the record, is Michael Ruck. I manage ODOT's Transportation Planning Unit within the Transportation Development Division. So happy to be here today to spend a few minutes with you to talk about all the work that's gone into creating this draft Oregon Public Transportation Plan that we're asking you to release for public review today. So I'm just going to spend a couple slides talking about the objectives of the plan and a little bit about how it fits with our other statewide planning documents. And then I'll turn it over to Lucia Ramirez, who's been our project manager, to talk a little more about content, and then we'll proceed quickly to get it wrapped up. So first off, those of you that have been involved in one of our statewide plans know that our visioning exercise is a pretty extensive process, but it really, doing one of these statewide plans gives us the opportunity to take a step back, work collaboratively with our policy advisory committee and stakeholders to develop a new vision for whatever the mode or topic is that we're working on as a state, so in this case, public transportation. It's really a key exercise to get buy-in around the table, and it sets the stage for all the work that we do throughout the rest of the planning process. So just a couple things I want to point out real quickly with the draft vision in the Oregon Public Transportation Plan. You'll notice the horizon year is 2045, so we're talking very long-term plan here. And a lot of the key themes you'll see us cover in the remaining slides, things like an integrated or integral, interconnected component of the transportation system that really make Oregon communities work regardless of where they are, what their size is, and how public transportation is such a key part of Oregon's quality of life economy, and contributes to goals we all want to see like public health, safety, and helping reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So that set the stage for the whole process that we've been working toward. These are our statewide transportation plans that are under your purview. The center circle there is the Oregon Transportation Plan, and each of the spokes or pieces of pie in that wheel there are the mode and topic plans that we all bring you to adoption, or in the case of the aviation plan, consult with. So you see in the bottom left-hand corner, the public transportation plan is there. But what I wanted to point out in particular here is these are primarily policy level documents, but by working in each mode and topic area, it gives us a chance to refine the content and really take a step and think about what it means from a policy and investment standpoint for our plans. They don't overlap, but they work together and build off each other, and this plan's no different. Real quickly on the OTP objectives, we've already talked about the opportunity to provide a shared vision for public transportation. We certainly hope that we've accomplished that. But you're going to hear, and if you read the document, we'll see a lot about roles and responsibilities for public transportation. The transit districts around Oregon are really a creature of sort of how they've grown up. And each community looks a little bit different, and a lot of what we've taken the opportunity in this plan to do is try to put those pieces together and think about how we are integrated and work together to accomplish that vision and all the policies and strategies in the plan. And then a little bit later, Hal's going to talk about the investment decisions it helps us create or work with. Finally, for me, what's new in the Oregon Public Transportation Plan? So the one prior to this, it was quite long in the tooth. It was from 1997, and really, to be blunt, was no longer a very good guide for us in today's world for public transportation. Probably the biggest change is this is a very much statewide focused plan. I think the old version was more rural and some of the connections between the rural parts of the state. This one, we worked hard to make sure it covered everything, and it has urban, rural components, and it recognizes, again, like I talked about, just the diversity of the transit districts, and this needs to be a plan for all of those. And then finally, we've done a lot of work, as you all know, on our other mode and topic plans recently. And while public transportation is its own mode, it works with others in order to be successful. Buses operate on the roadway system, the first and last mile connections with our bikeways, sidewalk facilities are needed to make public transportation work, and we need to put a plan together that takes into account all of that.
It feels like another big piece is that we finally have some sustainable funding that might also allow us to hope and dream a little differently too.
Exactly.
1997 was a bit bleak.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
and actually 2 years ago was bleak still.
Yeah.
So the timing is really
Definitely.
now.
It was an interesting process to have a group working toward really a lot of those objectives that the funding was able to get us, and then have that happen partway through and have to go back and say, how's things changed for us? Since that was a unique situation, this plan. So with that, I'll turn it over to Lucia to introduce herself.
Hello, my name is Lucia Ramirez. I'm a principal planner in Michael's planning unit. We've had a quite extensive public involvement process in building up this plan. We've had our policy committee, who's been like our project steering committee, reviewing information and recommending content for the plan. We had a technical advisory committee also that helped us dig into certain issues and help refine information. We started out early with stakeholder interviews and a survey of providers to find out what's on the table. We've done workshops at 2 of the Oregon Public Transit conferences. We had great participation there. We conducted 3 rider focus groups, and we worked with local agencies to try and find people from equity communities to come join us and talk to us about their experiences. And so we had 3 successful rider focus groups in 3 different parts of the state, so that was important. And 3 rounds of public outreach, public meetings, and an online open house. This will be our 3rd year of doing that, so we'll have lots of information. Wrong button. This is our Policy Advisory Committee member organizations. Early on, before this committee got started, the Commission approved the list of organizations. We have large and small providers represented, as well as different interests and agencies from throughout the state, including we've had value contributions, for example, from the Health Authority and from economic development perspective. So we've really benefited from having all these perspectives on our committee, and led by former Commissioner Lohman. We used that feedback to refine the content of this plan as we've gone through various drafts and iterations. And these are several big themes that are addressed throughout our plan and respond to the things that we've heard. People talk to us a lot about needing improved agency collaboration. And what they mean by that is not only among transit providers, but also among transit providers and local agencies, working with cities, counties, tribes, MPOs. Leading from that is working to have better connections between systems and regions. Can you get from one end of the state to the other? Can you link to your neighbor and have a sensible connection that's easy for the rider to use? Because our goal here is to make public transportation a reliable, easy-to-use service that's a viable option for many trips. And so in order to do that, it needs to be accessible, ready to use, there when you need it, etc. And we're working with Bike and Ped and transportation options to make sure they all work together and you can access the service and learn about related services that will help you ride. Safety is a theme throughout. Am I not close enough? Okay. Safety is a theme throughout, and this both means physical safety, as there are ramps and crosswalks, etc., and also feeling secure around transit. And people talk to us also about building a culture of transit, and what they mean by that, for our purposes, is making it a routine, regular consideration for people who need to travel, and also as we're doing our planning and our development work, is this an add-on that we're going to stick on later and try to figure out how it works, or is it going to be an integral part of how we conduct our planning and our land use to make sure it's all going to work together? There are 10 goals in the Oregon Public Transportation Plan, and the titles of them will look familiar because they are similar to our other plans, but these have been adapted and focused on public transportation for this plan. They are numbered in the plan, but that does not indicate a priority. It's just for organization purposes. And some of them are kind of themes that are carried throughout. Like I mentioned, safety and security. Equity is another one that's very important for this plan. So those are ideas that we've carried throughout the plan, and we have a particular goal focused on them as well. There are 5 chapters in the plan. The first one is just the introduction and context for the plan. Second is all the background information. What does our transit system look like? Who are the players? How do they work together? How are they funded? And then chapter 3 is really the heart of the plan. It's the goals, policies, and strategies. And you'll notice that they are written broadly, and they're intended to apply to as many people as possible. So we deliberately didn't say this belongs to this type of organization, because we want everybody to read them and consider how they can apply. Chapter 4 is all about investment scenarios, and these are examples of what the system might look like, what we might invest in under different levels of funding, starting with our current new funding from House Bill 2017. Chapter 5 is all about implementation, and it talks about roles a lot because of all the different players in public transportation who can do what kinds of activities to help contribute to the success of the plan and the system. There are also performance measures for measuring the progress of the plan statewide in Chapter 5. And I believe that is where I'm handing it off back to Hal.
Thanks. As those of you who were in Bandon, we shared some of the funding picture at that meeting, and as you can tell, that by far the local contribution to public transportation is the most significant component, followed by the feds. These particular numbers, they reflect the new statewide investment of the STIF. It increased the state contribution from about 4% to 14% overall. It's a significant infusion, but it just kind of puts it into context in terms of where we're at. With $200 million additional a biennium, you would think that it would kind of take us out of the spiral that folks in the public transportation realm have been in. It does move the line up considerably, but in 10 years we're going to be back kind of at that static level. And part of that is just not being able to keep up with investments. There was a huge infusion of federal dollars during the recession with the ARA funds, and a lot of that money, because it wasn't dependable, was spent in purchasing vehicles. That's just a quick example. Well, those vehicles are going to start to reach the end of their life cycle during this period, and in order to be able to maintain the service that those vehicles provided, there's going to need to be another uptick. So it's not the panacea we would hope it to be. It's certainly a better situation than we were before we started the development of this particular.
What date was the ARA funds? Year?
It was passed in 2009. Money started showing up a couple years later when folks were able to put their grant requests together and submit it. So, One of the key elements that came out of development of this plan is just a really crisp development of roles and responsibilities. And this was a needed and robust conversation, really. You know, the state's role sharpened up around developing policies and rules, things that folks could line up behind. Our job is to manage and distribute variable funding, both state and federal, and to convene, coordinate, and even mediate where necessary across all the various service providers. Public transportation providers, of course, they're the front line, the folks who need to be actually out there looking at service. But and part of this was overt in the development of the STIF funding, was really putting an added emphasis on the coordination and collaboration components, which perhaps in the past may not have been as robust as it could have been. Called out a role for the transportation options providers, timely since we'd finished the first in the nation transportation options plan earlier, and really to help folks connect with services that are available. And then again, the role of the cities, the counties, the MPOs, the tribes. Again, that's a funding, planning, land use role, along with encouraging coordination and collaboration across those areas.
Hal, with those clarifying roles and responsibilities, in particular for the three boxes that don't, or the boxes that don't include the state, is there capacity to be able to meet those responsibilities?
In all honesty, Chair Boehne, it's going to depend. And, you know, my shop focuses on trying to make sure we have capacity to help. It's going to be in those rural areas, the folks that are going to need the biggest leg up. There are an awful lot of small service providers that operate demand response service out of their homes, and their buses are parked in their yards, and we have an administration expectation with the state funds, and it's hard enough if you're the driver, dispatcher, administrator of a service. So we're putting our energy and our staff resources in making sure that those most vulnerable providers are able to succeed and grow.
My concerns would be that we get down to this return on the investment for the funding package that we were just able to secure. If we start hearing from parts of the state where their transit has not changed and where they still do not have any access, or I just worry that if this can be a very outward-facing story to be told, and so however we can help to tell a story that we want to hear would be, and it meets the needs of those that we're trying to serve, would be great.
And I appreciate that very much. And just to deviate a little bit from script, because some of our area commissions have not, you know, they don't hold their meetings on a monthly level, we've been tried out in front of them. I've gone to a few already, basically saying, you know, this work is coming. It's for new and improved service. We're here to help. We're concerned about fund supplanting, make sure that you maintain your current investments so they're actually able to grow and tell that story. We've visited all 8 of the 9 federally recognized tribes so far, again, letting them know both the opportunities and obligations. We will ramp up our regional transit coordinators and make sure that they're identifying folks that need a little extra help. So we are taking our responsibility there very seriously. So how does the OPTP relate to House Bill 2017 and the STIF? I'd like to say that we knew this money was coming when we started development of this plan, and that we were optimistic and were planning for a bright future. No, we went into development of this plan with our traditional sense of scarcity, and halfway through got the big reward of a certain amount of abundance. And it certainly put a different complexion on the plan and allowed us to put a few finer points moving forward. One of the key elements, and I'm going to touch on that in the next piece, so I'm going to move ahead in the interest of time, is we identified 3 key initiatives that we were going to put most of our energy on up front at the outset of this plan. One is plan integration. And when we developed the rules, as you may recall, for the Special Transportation Fund, we required in those rules that every plan submitted to this commission for approval is tied to some local plan. We didn't get super specific about the type of plan. It can be a transportation system plan. It can be a larger planning document within the county, but we wanted to make sure that the efforts that were being put forward were tied to some larger local planning structure. So we're going to continue to focus on making sure that we're tying the work that we do both through this plan, now that we have an overall statewide structure, to the local plans, to those ultimate STIF plans that will be coming here. So that's a first order level of business for us. The next piece is the regional and intercity service. A key funding component within the STIF is those what we're calling intercommunity connections. And those are areas where just between service providers, they might be able to align stops, schedules, service areas, get a little more overlap, get a little more efficiency across the system. That'll help us step back, and for those areas where there just aren't connections between significant communities, we keep looking at the coast between Florence and Yachats, between Eugene and Florence. Perhaps that's a place for my team to step in with some federal funds and provide some of that intercity connection. But ultimately, long-term goal would make sure that there was some means for somebody to travel around this state without being dependent upon a single occupancy vehicle. And then finally, and this was very near and dear to Commissioner Lohman's heart, is keeping an eye on the public transportation technology. And I'm an old gray hair. I mean, technology changes faster than I can keep up with it. We can't really anticipate what's going to be out 20 years, but we need to make sure that we've got our smart folks paying attention to what's coming, making sure that we're integrating the best and most efficient technologies into the service as we move along. So with that, I'm going to hand it back to Mr. Rock to take us home.
Okay, just a couple slides to finish up here. I will not spend a lot of time on this in order of time, but Hal talked a lot about plan integration, and this is sort of, if you look at the right side in the shade of blue there, it's kind of the way transportation planning works in Oregon. Statewide plans down through regional plans, and then you get down into on-the-ground investments. Well, transit has other similar work going on, coordinated plans with human service agencies, transit development plans or master planning, and now these STIF plan elements. I think it's incumbent on us in the planning arena to implement this plan is to be efficient, figure out a way to be efficient with these documents, link them up, help those small agencies put together their investment plans, because we are doing a lot of similar work, and so how do we make that happen? Just real quick on next steps, we're here today to ask you to release it for public review. If you do that, we will be out talking to additional folks over the next couple months. Your acronym quiz for this meeting is OOH, Online Open House. We'll have that available to collect a lot of comments. We would hold a public hearing, or ask you to hold a public hearing at your July meeting. We'd probably close the comment period on July 20th. That'd be over 2 months open, so I think we'd be in good shape. Revise as needed, and then come back to you this fall in hopes of adoption. That was a lot of the team that helped work on it. There's some links. I would want to thank Gene Palmatier, who's not here today, one of House staff who's been a great help as a transit expert in guiding us through this document. And that's it from us. Thank you.
Wonderful presentation. Please,
So
go ahead.
if I may, at this time, I think I'm requesting a formal motion from the commission.
If we don't have any edits, revisions, or comments at this point, I welcome a motion.
Madam Chair, I move to approve the release of the draft Oregon Public Transportation Plan for public review.
Okay, further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Great job. And this document is really well done. Just kind of the overview and facts and planning, and I took it to the OASIS meeting the other day, and just so folks get an idea of what's on the horizon. Great job. Okay, so now we have some, let's see, grants for review. So next is request approval for the Public Transportation Advisory Committee recommendations on the distribution of some federal funds.
Wait for my folks to get up here.
Oh, there was just handwritten. There was sent grants and gold.
Oh, okay. Where did you see those?
They came this morning in the package. They
Oh,
came from
okay.
Margie.
And do we have comments in our packets as well that you wanted to note on these? Nope, okay.
Oh, so Chair Boehne, members of the Commission, again, my name's Hal Gard. I'm the Administrator of the Rail and Public Transit Division for the Oregon Department of Transportation. And with me today, I brought Mr. Jeff Hazen. He is the Vice Chair of our Public Transportation Advisory, your Public Transportation Advisory Committee, and he chaired a work group. Just real quickly, as you may recall from the materials in Bandon, we walked through kind of the overall funding picture for public transportation that is administered by the Department of Transportation. And there are different decision points for the commission, and it's either direct approval of discretionary grants or weighing in on or approving the formulas that we use to distribute money. And this is a proposed federal formula funding change. And with that, I'm going to turn it over. Which one of you starts? You going to turn it over to Jeff? Jeff, it's all you.
Good afternoon. For the record, Jeff Hazen. I'm the Executive Director at Sunset Empire Transportation District up in Clatsop County. So, as chair of this work group, we were tasked with looking at the current allocation process for the Section 5311 funds, which are used to support rural transit agencies. And they can be used for operating, capital, planning. Most of the agencies, and mine included, we use it for operating. And it is our biggest, our largest grant that we get from the federal program. Eligible subrecipients include local governments. It could be cities, counties, transit agencies like myself, Indian tribes, and nonprofit agencies. The concerns that were out there leading up to the formation of the work group included that there really wasn't rewards for performance. Like if you added service, expanded service, got additional ridership, there really wasn't adequate reward for that. It was also hard to accommodate startups, and it was hard for some to achieve high performance. One of the things that we did was get all of the recipients, and there's 35 of them across the state, involved. We had, the committee was a 9-member committee with representation of agencies throughout the state. But we reached out to the different agencies to get their input. We had 4 public meetings. And during that time, we also put out 2 different surveys, and that really guided our conversation, especially the second one. The first one, I think we had a little over a 50% return rate on the survey, but the last one, with the help of one of the committee members, her and myself, called everybody and said, hey, please get your survey filled out. We need your help with a couple of decisions. And so they were more than welcome to weigh in on things. And we had several people either come to the meetings or listen in via phone. And it was really important for me to have that participation because when we announced that we were putting together this work group, my phone started ringing. And some of my counterparts across the state were very concerned that one of their largest sources of fundings, we were looking at a change to it. And so they were very, very nervous about that. And I reassured them that it was going to be very open. We're going to be seeking input, and we did that. By the time we got to the end, we got positive feedback, including those people that had reached out to me. I got follow-up phone calls from them thanking me, saying you guys did a great job. We appreciate the work you did and that you actually listened to us. So felt very good about that. So with all that said, the objectives we had were, making sure that we were being fair and equitable, providing funding stability. And I think that was the biggest concern that a lot of the agencies had, was they've been used to having a certain amount of money each biennium, and they were a little nervous that we'd mess with that, but we wanted to make sure we kept that stable. Obviously connectivity, that's very important in transit, and then stewardship of the taxpayer funds, very important. Our main role in public transit is to get people where they want and need to go. We wanted to build in flexibility, efficiency, and then encourage growth and support new service. So there weren't a whole lot of changes. And up here on the screen, I've got what we currently have. Everybody has a $100,000 base, a biennium base. And that was one of the things that second survey really helped guide our decision, because we were really split on that, whether we should keep a base or not have a base. And the input we got, the majority of the people wanted to keep that base, again, for their feeling of stability of funding. So we didn't make a change in that. Everybody will have that $100,000 base. The one thing that we did change, though, is that currently there's a couple providers in the state that receive multiple bases. And that's because maybe there was a couple of separate transit providers that consolidated, and so they each had that $100,000 base. So then the consolidation gave them 2 bases, or 3. One agency was 3. And so that was another thing that we got input on from that second survey, and the decision was made to recommend eliminating the multiple bases. And I will say that one of the people that was on the committee is one of the recipients of those multiple bases. She actually is from Eastern Oregon and currently has 3 multiple bases, and she supported the decision of the committee on that. And I'll talk more in the next slide about what kind of makes up for that. The remaining funds currently were distributed 60% based on miles, 40% based on ridership. That has not changed. This is one thing that has changed. Currently, we're guaranteed 100% of our previous allocation from the previous biennium. We've changed that to a 95% of the previous allocation. And that gave the agencies that had that multiple base a little bit of security in the fact that they're not going to lose that, necessarily that extra $200,000 if they got 3 bases right off the bat. They're going to still get 95% of what they got the last biennium. So it's not quite as big of a bite off from them. And the reason to go down to the 95% was to free up some funds to reward performance. To where you have agencies that are doing well, have grown their system, got increased ridership. There'll now be some money set aside for them to be rewarded for their performance. The cap based on funding availability, if there was extra money left over, then it would be capped, or what's going into play. I think right now it's 5%. Yeah, there's a 5% cap. Now it'll be 110% of the previous allocation, so that even if your service went way up, there's only a certain amount of dollars in the pot, you'll be capped at an extra 10% above what you got last biennium. Startup program, no change to that. If there's a new proposal for transit service, ODOT has internal procedures to accommodate and work with those people. So the work group finished up their work. We took it to the PTAC, and PTAC is recommending that the OTC approve the proposed changes to the formula allocation. With that, I'll take any questions you might have.
I just wanted to put in a comment really quickly about incentivizing regionalization of services too. And I can understand where there's a continuity of when you can build a system and not lose funding in a way, incentivizes good behavior too. So I appreciate that that 5% concession, if you will, to be able to put in for incentivizing other good behaviors. It matters to build systems, to not be trying to just do it in one small little area. Looking across those boundaries of how you can serve people instead of an organization really is critical. And I've watched how, if that means that you lose money, many won't do that because it wouldn't make sense because it can barely meet the need today. So I'm grateful to see that you took that into consideration, and I think it makes great sense. Because really, at the end of the day, you're still serving a system that meets those needs. But I think this is a great program. Do we have any questions or comments? So I'd welcome a motion if someone feels so compelled. Okay.
I'm on a roll, Madam Chair. I am requesting approval of the Public Transportation Advisory Committee's recommendations to the distribution formula for the FTA Formula Grants for Rural Areas Program, Section 5311.
Excellent. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. And now we have some awards for the 1820 Public Transit Individual Discretionary Grant Awards.
For the Oregon Department of Transportation. And again, this is a whole series of different discretionary grant awards of that multi-headed hydra of different funding pots that we distribute on a fairly regular basis. And I'm hoping just to highlight that in the future we're going to just come to you a couple set times a year with kind of big buckets of asks so that you'll know when we're coming and what we're asking for as we come forward. With that, I'm going to let Marcia navigate kind of the various funding pots so that I make sure we keep our terms and our money colors separated. So with that, Marcia.
All right, thank you. Again, for the record, my name is Marcia Hoskins. I'm the Public Transportation Manager for the Oregon Department of Transportation. And as we noted in Bandon, when we presented to Commissioner Simpson and Commissioner Van Brocklen, there are various points, like Hal said, that we will come to you asking for action. This particular one is we're asking for approval of some discretionary awards that we've been doing with federal funds. So there's three different dribs and drabs of federal money that we were able to pull together to create this discretionary solicitation, and I'm going to talk about each three separately. I think the piece I want to highlight is these are small dollars, but if you take a look at what we were able to award with that, that tells you what a huge impact it has on some of the rural agencies that Hal was talking about. The first one is Federal Transit Administration funds enhanced mobility of seniors and individuals with disabilities. This is separate from our large formula distribution that we do every biennium for seniors and disabilities federal funds. This was $1.7 million that was actually intended for rural areas with a population of less than 50,000. We received 24 applications. Some of those had 2 or 3 different projects on them. In the end, we were able to, or we're recommending award for 25 projects. It was, this particular solicitation was done with a selection committee that included some rail and public transit division staff, including the regional staff that are located around the state. It also included a member of our Public Transportation Advisory Committee, and the member that was included is actually our citizen at large, so pretty objective. Did not have we were looking for someone who wouldn't have an application in the game, right? And these particular applications were rated and ranked by this committee, and in the end, the highest ranking projects were discussed. If the regional team or any of the staff had concerns, they expressed them. And we're recommending 25 projects, some operations projects, some contracted or purchased service projects, some preventive maintenance. There were 7 applications that were not recommended. 3 of them were actually ineligible for this type of funding, and the last 4 just didn't rise high enough in terms of the ranking. And you have a handout, I believe, that details all the recommended awards as well as the ones that weren't recommended.
So of these numbers, so is that the maximum? So you had 1.7 to award, or you have some? So
that's the maximum.
And then you were overcommitted in terms of it was oversubscribed.
Yes.
Or okay, so you work back with each one of them and say, can you accept a certain amount, or okay?
Yes, that was actually, Chair Boehne, that was actually part of the application that we asked, is this scalable? If we can't give you all of it, is there a lesser amount you can accept? And we did do that in a couple of cases. Some of the applications said, no, if I can't get it, I can't, it doesn't help to give me half or whatever for this particular pot of money. The next piece of funds that we had to distribute is also Federal Transit Administration money. It's a bus and bus facilities program. This particular program is for not just rural, but rural and small urban. And then we had another piece of funding for the mass transit vehicles. So the handouts that you have detail the what we're recommending for awards for both replacement vehicles, some expansion vehicles, I think 8 rural expansion vehicles that made it, and then some facilities, equipment, amenities kinds of projects. These are a more objective type of scoring in terms of it's pretty numeric. It's the age, miles, and condition of the vehicles. The oldest and worst ones get replaced first. We had 48 applications. Some of those had more than one vehicle on it. So we awarded what is 36 applications, but it equated to 54 projects or vehicles, amenities, signage, and shelter. 12 applications were not awarded, and that just is because their vehicles numerically didn't rank as high a need for replacement as some of the others. The last piece is one that I actually want to highlight for the Commission because this is your doing. For the 1821 STIP, the Commission directed $5 million a year for 3 years to replace transit vehicles and improve the condition of the fleet. So this is the first year of that award, and it's huge. We had 28 applications that were received. There were actually 87 vehicles requested on those 28 applications. We are only able to, with the $5 million award, 51 of those, which starts to tell you how big the need is, right? But this is still huge. This was amazing. People are very, very happy to get this. They're looking forward to the next $5 million, already planning for it. As Hal noted, we have this ARA bubble of transit vehicles that are aging out. So this is going to make a huge difference. Those 51 vehicles go to 21 different agencies, and again, I think you have a detailed handout that talks about who those go to. So what we are requesting at this time is that the Commission approve these discretionary grant awards. We are hoping to have them in place July 1st. We are in the background preparing agreements, recognizing that you all may not approve some of them, but we had to get started because we're hoping July 1st to get people ordering these vehicles. So.
Do we have any questions or revisions to what's been presented? Okay, please.
Is there like a requirement of what must take place with the buses that are being replaced?
You mean what happens to the ones they're getting rid of?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're disposed of, and any proceeds, whether they're sold or salvaged, have to go back into the program. They
Great.
have to be directed back into the program they came from.
Great.
And I believe that was the preamble for a motion.
That's what I thought.
Yes, I think it's what
Okay, yes, I think you're right. And with that, I will, Madam Chair, request approval for the 2018-20 Public Transportation Discretionary Grant Awards.
Excellent. Do we have further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
All right,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
That's a lot of work, so
job.
nice job.
It makes a huge difference. Thank you.
Yes. Next, we have an informational item, and it's to receive an update on the Federal Highway Administration review of the Oregon Department of Transportation's geoprofessional program and subsequent recommendations. And nice to see you again. And this, we've had a couple of opportunities for us to take a look at some of our programmatic elements, and I think this is a way for us to be thinking of continuous improvement. And so I will go ahead and turn it over to you, Mr. Kim.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Baney and members of the Commission. I'm David Kim, the Statewide Project Delivery Manager, and beside me is Steve Cooley, ODOT's Chief Engineer. We're here today to provide you with an update on the review of ODOT's geoprofessional program and the actions we're taking. The US 97 Wickiup Junction project exposed some potential risks and vulnerabilities to the quality, capacity, and consistency of ODOT's geoprofessional program. In June of last year, the ODOT technical leadership team formed a working group to really take a look at and assess and review our geo program using our geoprofessionals. They initiated that work in September of 2017. In addition to the working group, we contacted Federal Highways and asked them to conduct an external review of our geoprofessional program. FHWA has a national resource center that brings in experts from across the country to assess and provide recommendations for how we can improve our technical programs and our engineering programs. The team comprised of experts from Federal Highways, and these individuals had substantial experience conducting similar types of reviews. The team also comprised of 2 ODOT geotechnical professionals licensed in the field. The FHWA review evaluated ODOT's technical capacity, organizational structure, staff dispersion, and quality. Based on the FHWA work efforts, we decided to put a pause on the internal ODOT review pending the outcome of the recommendations. This review occurred between October of last year and February of this year, and the results are in the FHWA report included in your packet. And we also have a summary of the recommendations in the letter dated March 1st, 2018. We agree with all the recommendations. The ODOT Internal Working Group recently reconvened to review those recommendations and come up with an implementation plan. This working group is currently meeting monthly to meet the timeframes outlined in the ODOT's response to Federal Highways. I'm now going to turn it over to Steve Cooley, who will walk through and elaborate on the 6 recommendations and the associated milestones.
Good afternoon. For the record, I'm Steve Cooley, ODOT's Chief Engineer, and I'm currently overseeing the internal working group that's responsible for developing the implementation plan for these 6 recommendations from Federal Highway. So I'm going to kind of briefly walk through each of the recommendations and then at the end give a summary of our progress to date.
And just a clarifying question, so is that internal group the same as a change management team, or is that different?
I believe it's the same team.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I'm just going to walk through each recommendation. Develop a statewide quality control and quality assurance standard for geo deliverables within 12 months of receiving this report. That's number 1. In Federal Highways' review of the quality control plans and quality reviews, they found that the Region Tech Center's quality control plans not at the level of detail needed for a geoprofessional program. They were inconsistent and the quality reviews varied between the regions. There was a lack of QC/QA standards and direction from headquarters. So it's clear that we have some work to do in our overall quality program. In order for ODOT to ensure our quality in the geoprofessional program, we need to develop a more consistent and robust statewide QC/QA program. Out of all these recommendations, this is the overarching improvement. The other recommendations are either parts of or in support of the statewide QC/QA program. I'd just like to take a moment to distinguish between quality control and quality assurance, which I'll be referring to as QC and QA, mostly because it's easier to say. Quality control, or QC, reviews are performed on every project and the deliverables on all of the deliverables as the project is being developed. These are the primary independent peer reviews, which are checking standards, calculations, approach, and all are documented. These are performed by the regions or consultants as the projects are assigned. The quality assurance, or the QA, is an independent review performed after the fact to ensure the quality has been followed and documented. And these are generally performed by a central staff statewide, which allows the statewide view and potential process improvement. So this is the feedback loop. The QA reviews the QC, and if they see statewide trends or issues with our quality control, then they can make suggestions, and it's a continuous improvement. So that is the big lift for us here in all these recommendations.
And who does the QA?
That would be managed centrally out of my shop,
Okay.
or technical services branch. So number 2, provide a geoprofessional to technically oversee and direct geoprofessionals units. Over the years, as the Federal Highway report indicates, we've had a number of changes: decentralization, right sizing, and the 11-to-1 employee to manager ratio that have diminished the capacity of our geoprofessional discipline, as well as impacted a few others. This recommendation involves having the frontline manager managing the geoprofessional staff have a geo background. Federal Highways review revealed frontline managers with geoprofessional experience are present in 2 out of the 5 regions. The other regions and the project delivery branch in Salem have a combined management approach, and this structure uses lead workers to provide that technical oversight. So they're recommending a change in that oversight. Number 3, assure that projects are supported with the appropriate level of technical geoprofessional competency throughout the life of the project. This is about determining whether we have the right people on the right projects with the right technical competency. Federal Highway found that ODOT has competent geoprofessionals on staff in totality, but staffing levels across all regions aren't consistent. It's hard to maintain competency levels with limited resources and resource projects at the appropriate competency level. So regions 1 and 2 here in the Valley have a bigger program size, they have a bigger tech center, and in the individual disciplines they have more staff to help maintain that competency. Regions 3, 4, and 5 have a little more of a challenge to that when they might only have 1 or 2 in each of these discipline areas.
So how do we have examples where we didn't know the need for the level of geotechnical review until after we learned that we needed more geotechnical review. So where in this process ahead of the game do we have someone who's, and maybe this is you, who has that background to be able to say from learned experience or whatnot that this particular project has a few elements that give you that pause, that you want to look at it a little differently. So where in this setup does that happen? Is that on the front end of the QA/QC? Is that on the is that happening in the region? How do we get ahead of some of these kind of unique circumstances ahead of time?
I think that gets back into the recommendation that this team is working on. They're going to look at the overall quality control plan and then these specific areas of how do we make sure that we have the qualified staff supporting that project. That gets into the managers responsible for that staff. The reason that they want them to have a geo background is that they understand that, and they will be assigning the staff to make those appropriate decisions.
Okay.
So Chair Boehne, one of the roles of my new position is really to look at resourcing statewide and taking a one ODOT approach. So we have a statewide geo hydro hazmat leadership team, and as we go through this process, what they're going to identify is where that expertise lies so that we can line up the right resource with the right project. And the hope is that through the implementation plan of this recommendation, we'll identify where those gaps are. But right now, we're in a triage mode, and so what we've done is we've gone through the STIP, identified all those projects that have a geo-professional component, and identifying which staff resources are going to actually perform the design, which staff resources are going to conduct the QC, and which staff resources are going to conduct the QA.
Correct. Okay. Recommendation number 4, develop and implement a core competency program for the geoprofessionals. Federal Highway reported ODOT has made progress in this area related to our training, but a fully developed core competency framework is needed. By developing the framework, required competencies for each geoprofessional are identified. Employee development plans can be created to meet these requirements, and short and long-term training plans can be implemented. This will sustain the technical expertise statewide. Number 5, develop a statewide policy that clearly defines and differentiates the work products by professional of record, including registered geologists, certified engineering geologists, professional engineers, and geotechnical engineers. Staffing the regions by workload has resulted in a disparity of geoprofessionals by region. It gets back to the bigger regions have more staff and the smaller regions have smaller staff. Work products are inconsistently being developed statewide, so some regions could have a work product being developed by a geotechnical engineer, where another region may be developing that same work product by a certified engineering geologist. Now we're following the engineering board regulations on what work we can and can't do with our stamps, but I think identified in this plan that there's a better way to do that. And by developing the to assure the statewide consistency of project assignments, a statewide policy should be developed that clearly defines those roles within each of those different disciplines. So we'll identify for the agency, this is what we're going to require in each of those areas. Here's the work products associated with each one of those professionals.
Another reality that we have going forward is not just capacity, but hiring potential. And we know that it's difficult from a public agency to hire well, hiring will be difficult in general, just that's one of the dynamics. So does this need to be an ODOT person, or can some of this be contracted out, especially to add capacity, and when we have projects that maybe won't have all of that geotechnical need? So thoughts, is that part of this mix?
Yes.
Okay.
The quality control is going to be, the standards and everything will be set up for whether we're doing it in-house or we're outsourcing that model.
Okay.
And we're going to have to outsource quite a bit of our work.
Okay, thank you.
What percent would you say would be in-house versus outsource?
Currently, I think our plan was to have a 70-30, so 70% outsourced, 30% internal. I think it's what we based all of our projections on. Number 6, establish a statewide geotechnical engineer to provide clear statewide technical and program leadership for the geoprofessional program. The recommendations in Federal Highways report address quality control, quality assurance, technical oversight, capacity, and core competency of the ODOT geoprofessional program. To implement such change will require statewide oversight by a single entity, and that's what they're calling out for the state geotechnical engineer. This is very similar to the structure that we have currently in other areas. We have a statewide traffic roadway engineer, we have a statewide traffic or bridge engineer, statewide construction and materials engineer. They have delegated authorities. They are responsible for all the policies and procedures related to those disciplines and manage that statewide for statewide consistency. This would fall right in line with that structure. A statewide geotechnical engineer role, I believe, will provide the ownership of the program statewide to continue and sustain these recommendations and improve our quality. So those are all the recommendations, as David mentioned, that we're in support of all of these recommendations. The progress update, the working group that's been working on this effort has some of our best and brightest professionals on that team. 2 of the members were on the Federal Highway team when they were doing all the audits and gathering all the data, and were there while they put together those recommendations. So they have front-hand knowledge of what are the issues and are using that to come up with what our recommendation is for implementation. This team is currently focusing on recommendation number 1 to develop the statewide QC/QA standard for geodeliverables by the March 1st, 2019 deadline. Establishing the QC/QA program and implementation plan includes identifying the required technical resources, deliverables, structure, and competency levels needed for implementation. This will immediately feed into the other recommendations that Federal Highway made. So before we can identify some of these other areas, having that overall plan, these other recommendations will fit within that and support that overall program. Next, I will be meeting with Federal Highway next month to provide a work plan and the first progress update on the implementation of all 6 recommendations. The working group is on track for delivery of the recommendations 2 through 4 by this fall, and for delivery of the remainder of the recommendations by the March 1st, 2019 deadline. So that's the update on the recommendations. Just as a side note, as we ramp up for House Bill 2017, the quality of our designs and contract documents will be critical for our success. I've initiated a quality control, quality assurance review for all disciplines, which is currently underway. So we're not just doing this one, we're doing all of our quality control plans. This review will be focused on the technical engineering deliverables. The process will set statewide standards per discipline, per tech center, and have minimum standards for consultant-delivered projects. There will be a centrally managed unit responsible for the QA. So there's quite a bit going on related to quality control right now with ODOT.
So for next steps, as we move forward to implement the FHWA recommendations, we plan to go before the Continuous Improvement Advisory Committee to provide them with a briefing of our progress. In addition, ODOT's technical leadership will monitor progress of the work efforts. We expect to have a final report by spring of next year. And before I close, I just want to take a moment to thank and acknowledge Federal Highways for their support, their work, and their partnership on this effort. And I want to acknowledge that we have Tim Rogers here. He was on the team. He's a FHWA Division Bridge Engineer. And we also have Tova Pelch, who's on the team, and she's the ODOT Regional and Geoenvironmental Engineer. Thank you.
So, with what we've learned, a couple questions. One, is there anything that's not on this list that you are implementing that you would like for us to also know about? These are the recommendations that they were able to find, but were there things that became relevant to you and that you felt like we really needed to be looking into?
I think we're relying on that working group to, they've gone through and they're not just looking at how we do things today, they're looking at what, you know, what would be the quality control plan necessary to sustain the quality in our professional program there. So they're not being held back. Everything's on the table. So I'm looking forward to seeing what their first draft plan is, because they're supposed to be taking a look at in all areas. So I'm assuming that they're going to come up with some other recommendations that they've seen.
Great.
Chair Boehne, through other efforts, the ODOT technical leadership team is working on a concept called the health of the disciplines, and we're looking at quality across all disciplines. We're also looking at manuals, guidance, and standards. We have a lot of manuals that are outdated, and with a shift in the workforce and having a lot of newer employees, we want to get them to have a reference guide for the different tools that are available. So we have over 60 manuals and disciplines, and many of those are maybe 5 or 10 years old. And so getting a renewed effort by each of the technical leadership teams to own those manuals and provide that guidance. And through that process is really a collaborative effort in the sense that the 5 regions are the delivery arm of ODOT, and recognizing there's some flexibility and autonomy within the regions and finding balance between that and some standardization.
Chair Boehne, to add on to David's comment, we're also with that evaluating our standards and the manuals, but with that developing some training because we have a lot of turnover and we have a lot of new staff coming online. So with the update of the manuals and our standards, we're going to provide some basic training for the new staff that are coming along in the design phase and also in construction. We have a lot of new construction project managers as well. So we're working at the training component to bring them up to speed.
The last question is, at least for me, it would be, so we have some projects that have already been designed and we haven't quite put the shovels in the ground. Anything that we need to do looking back to make sure that we have implemented some of these new learned lessons and before we actually go forward on construction? Is that also happening?
Chair Boehne, on the existing projects that are underway, with I think the group of geoprofessionals that we have is working together now across the region boundaries and even with headquarters to ensure, like I mentioned, we do have a core competency in totality within ODOT. It's just not maybe located in all of the regions. So we're pooling those resources and helping in all of the projects within the different regions to make sure that we're accounting for some of these things that we're going to be implementing.
To make sure that we don't go forward on a project and we haven't been able to have that review, just even as a cursory glance of making sure that we didn't miss something, not that we would intentionally, obviously, but we just have learned some lessons here that we would want to make sure we apply.
So Chair Boehne, as part of the Federal Highway Review process, they did take a look at some past projects to identify where there may be challenges. I know as part of the triage after the US 97 Wickiup Junction project, we did have a team go back and take a look at other potential projects in the pipeline to make sure that we had the quality piece addressed.
Thank you. Okay. Any other questions? All right. I burned through them, sorry. Only because I hear about this a little bit. Okay, so that was an informational item. Anything else that we want from the team at this point? All right, thank you very much. You have a lot of work in front of you, but we're proud to have the team we have. Thank you. All right, next we have an action item. This is, and actually I think we're going to call folks up together. Is that the Travis's? Okay. So STIP amendments, and we will start off with US 97 Century Drive. So I think we're going to have Mr. Farnsworth and Mr. Bryant kick us off, and then we'll move on to the others.
Chair Boehne, members of the Commission, Bob Bryant, Region Manager for ODOT's Region 4. With me, Gary Farnsworth, incoming Region Manager for Region 4. We're here to request an amendment to the State Transportation Improvement Program to include funding for a project in Central Oregon. In 2014, the Transportation Commission approved a US 97 South Century Drive interchange to the U.S. Forest Service boundary to be developed through our design phase. And in 2016, there was an independent decision for federal lands access funding to improve an intersection that falls within the boundary of the project that we were in the process of developing. We're here today to request additional funding to move the US 97 South Century Drive interchange to U.S. Forest Boundary project into a construction phase and leverage those federal land access funds at Vandevert to improve a first phase of that larger segment to connect up South Century to the intersection improvement at Vandevert. And this essentially would be an extension of the separated, divided 4-lane section of US 97 from South Century Drive south towards the forest boundary. Wouldn't be able to complete that project that we've developed, but it would implement a first phase that would connect up Vandevert to the improvements at South Century Drive. So we're requesting an increase in funding of about $7 million in order to be able to add that construction phase to the US 97 project. And either Gary or I would be happy to answer questions about the project or about our local stakeholders or area commission's support for these types of investments in the US 97 corridor.
I had a question about the flap. Is there anything that we have to do in terms of engaging with U.S. Forestry related to those funds? I'm just curious, there's flexibility for us to move them around, or is it because it's connecting to another type of Forest Service boundary?
It was the Federal Lands Access Program funds were specific to an improvement at the intersection of US 97 at Vandevert Road, primarily because Vandevert provides direct access to federal lands, recreational access up into the national forest at that location, and that was the basis for a decision to authorize the Federal Lands Access funding at that location. So we work closely with Western Federal Lands, who is the program manager for the Federal Lands Access program, and of course because of the fact that all this section of US 97 is within the U.S. Forest Service jurisdiction, and we're there by easement. U.S. Forest Service is a close partner in all the work that we've been doing across this segment of US 97, working closely with them. That answer your question? Thank you.
Sure does, Bob.
And one thing that I would just put on the record is that this is in Deschutes County, and we are putting some limited funds in. We did check, and there isn't a conflict of interest, but I just wanted to, and we do have a quorum outside of me being a participant anyway.
Thank you, Chair.
Mm-hmm. I would welcome a motion if we feel ready.
All right. Jeez, I am
You're in
on
charge
fire
of
today,
motions
right?
today.
Just call me Motion Man.
Uh-huh.
So with that, Madam Chair, I would request approval to amend the 1821 STIP to increase funding for US 97 South Century Drive to US Forest Service Boundary Project by $7,689,171 to add right-of-way, utilities, and construction phases.
Wonderful. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Well done. Yes.
Thank you. Madam Chair, would you like the record to show that you recused yourself from the vote?
Sure.
Okay.
Not necessary, but let's go ahead. Yes. Thank you.
I'd like the record to show that this was my last formal
Yes,
request
I
to
was
the
just going to
Commission
say,
as
this
Manager.
is
So
exactly.
thank you all
Way
very
to
much.
bring home the bacon.
Thank you all.
Yes, thank you. And I look forward to getting you involved in many committees outside of with your retirement. So, yes. Okay. Let's go on to the next one. So Paul, are you taking the lead on this one?
Madam Chair, I
All
am.
right.
Paul Mather, Highway
Okay.
Division Administrator, here acting as a Region 3 Manager today and sitting in for Frank Reading. This is a project that I actually handed off to Frank, 8 years ago. We've been working on this rest area for a number of years with a long history and a long windy road to get to the very last phase of this rest area, which we went to bid with. So I'm here requesting approval to amend the 1821 STIP. I will note in our letter we have a typo in there. It says 1518. It's actually, we're amending the 1821 STIP to increase funding for the construction phase of the I-5 Siskiyou Rest Area Phase 2. The rest area Phase 1 was the grading, the site civil work of the project. This is the actual building of the physical rest area. The bids came in $2.6 million over. We had one bidder on the project, and was likely the most significant factor in the overage is just a lack of competition that we're seeing not only in this bid but in several of our bids. Yeah, the project, so we're requesting approval for the 2.6. So the funding that will come from the Lower River Road project, if you remember, the commission approved Region 3 to negotiate with Josephine County the jurisdictional transfer of Lower River Road. That request envisioned that the entire highway would be transferred. In our negotiations with them, that was not where both parties landed. They landed on a shorter section of that highway, thus less of the $9 million that was allocated. It will be needed for that transfer. The balance of that we're requesting being used to cover the overage on the rest area project.
So questions that we ask when this occurs at the county: would it have made a difference if we broke it up into a couple of different contracts so that maybe local contractors who might not have the capacity, I don't know the specifics, but would something like that have changed? Deciding to do the project another time of the year, would it make sense when you have one respondent to a to a contract that makes it difficult? So
Chair
other
Beatty,
pieces, if you'd add a little more, that'd be great.
Those are good questions, and probably not that we have a lot of context around, since we don't build a lot of rest areas. But the contractor that we did, that is the low bidder, is a local contractor. It is an area of work that we expected a lot more competition with. There was a lot of other plan holders for the project, and just received the one bid. If we went, our other option would be to wait and go back out with another bid request. We would have to look to change the project to some extent. Didn't really see any ways to make any significant changes to the project, and weighing all those options, I'm recommending that we proceed in this manner.
That's helpful.
No more.
Oh, Mr. Motion.
Yes.
Okay,
it's me
great.
again.
Well, if we feel ready.
Madam Chair, I would like to request approval to amend 2015-18 STIP to increase funding for the construction phase of I-5 Siskiyou Rest Area Ashland Phase 2 project. I believe this is in Region 3.
Sir, could you just correct it to be, isn't it the 1821 STIP?
It is.
Yep.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. As amended?
As amended.
Okay. Further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. And your last project?
Well, unfortunately, Chair, I think you're going to see me again next month. We're going to talk about some winter maintenance strategies down at Lakeview, and I think you'll see me down there again.
So you could go out on the utility of a restroom, but we're going to leave that one alone. All right. All right. Mr. Chickering, go right ahead.
Thank you, Chair Boehne. Commissioners, good afternoon. My name is Sonny Chickering. I'm the Region 2 Manager based in Salem. We're before you today on Agenda Item M concerning the Interstate 5 Kubler Boulevard to Delaney Road widening project. And our request today is to approve combining projects and programming of existing funds to create a construction phase with independent utility for this critical freight corridor project. The current project only has funding that is sufficient for developing preliminary plans and estimates and performing a reevaluation of the environmental impact statement record of decision, purchasing some right-of-way for future construction, but there is no current construction funds in the project. I should mention that those plans and estimates that we would put together with the current funding are for the entire corridor from Kubler Boulevard all the way to Delaney the construction project that we're asking you to authorize today is only for a portion of that length and only in the southbound direction. Currently, I-5 is 2 lanes in this section, and freight congestion is particularly acute in the southbound direction between Battle Creek. There's a box culvert at that location, and the Commercial Street Southeast on-ramp. There's medium and heavy trucks make up 22% of the vehicles in that segment, which is very high, actually. There's a steep and continuous grade of 5 to 6% for a distance of over 3,500 feet. And the ADT, the average daily traffic, is at 60,000 per day. Currently, that's two-way count, going to 84,000 by 2040. So we're expecting an increase in traffic and a commensurate increase in freight traffic. And with that steep grade there, we could really use a third lane for climbing purposes. We also have safety that's being affected currently by slowdowns in the right lane when the trucks are losing momentum heading up the hill, and a lot of unpredictable merging into the left lane by passenger vehicles that are trying to get around those trucks. So we do have an accident issue in that area, and during winter operations we also have a problem with trucks that lose momentum, start to slide, or get stuck, and there they are on the hill and they're in the way. They're difficult to move out of the way to keep traffic flowing. We've identified and compared 6 different possible construction projects within that entire corridor. We believe this is the best option, although we did look at widening to 3 lanes for the full length in both lanes, in one direction only and the other direction. We looked at maybe just replacing some structures at this time and coming back and widening and adding a lane later, but then you have widened bridges that serve no utility in the short term. So we felt like this project where we add the climbing lane, we'd get immediate and long-term benefit from, so we're recommending that we move forward with the construction phase for that project. And that concludes my presentation.
Do we have questions about this project?
Real quick, the right-of-way that was under the current cost headed at 13, and then it switched to 2.8. What was the how were the savings incurred? 9 million. How did that result come into play as a result of a right-of-way?
Yeah, Commissioner Simpson. Actually, what we have done, and it's been our past practice in past STIPs, is to park money in phases, and as we continue to accumulate additional funds, then we move them to the appropriate phases. We didn't have enough money to create a construction phase, and so we had to put the money that was available into the PE, the preliminary engineering phase, and the right-of-way phase. We knew what our PE number was going to be at that time, so we put an actual number in there of $4,996,000 that you see in that column, and we just parked the remainder of it in the right-of-way phase. Now that we have a construction phase and a better scope, we know how much we actually need in that right-of-way phase, so we've corrected that in the proposal.
If there's no other questions, Madam Chair, I request to approve the amendment of 2018-21 STIP to combine projects with I-5 Kubler Boulevard to Delaney Road widening project to allow construction of the 3rd lane on the portion of I-5 southbound.
Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you very much. And while we invite the division administrators up for the budget discussion, I'd like to go ahead and ask for the consent agenda. So if there are no edits or adjustments to the consent agenda, of which there is an item on here that also is in Deschutes County, just for clarity's sake, I don't need to recuse myself, but since we have a quorum, I'll go ahead and just step aside on that one. So I'd welcome a motion of the consent
Madam Chair,
agenda.
I move approval of the consent agenda.
Okay. Any further discussion? All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. So now we have the budget discussion. Receive an overview on the presentation from the ODOT divisions about the programs and development of the 1921 budget.
And Madam Chair, if I may, I think we'll start it off with Mr. Ficker, who will again provide context based on the conversation that took place down in Bandon, and then he'll pass the baton I think, to Mr. Mather to begin this divisional conversation.
Excellent, thank you.
Hello, Daryl Ficker, ODOT Budget. This is the second of 3 presentations at the OTC. The first presentation in April focused on mechanical aspects of the budget and the role of the OTC in the development of the budget. Today's presentation will, the division will give a brief presentation on description of their programs and discuss what policy packages they have forward for 1921. The June OTC meeting will be for the approval of the agency request budget, including policy packages that the OTC is going to approve. Brief recap from April, DAS sets the inflation rate. They set what we're going to have for positions as far as how much that's going to cost for all state agencies. We operate in a system with the other 160 state agencies. The OTC impacts the proposed budget by approving the STIP, by approving modal plans, traffic safety plans, and the like, STIP amendments like you just did here. Those will play themselves out in future budgets as far as how the cash flow goes. So those decisions you make today will be played out in 1921 and in 21-23. Policy packages are used to increase the number of FTE or to increase the size of a program or a change of program or just a new program. Phase in and phase outs are used to increase the budget to account for the payout of projects you've already approved in the STIP. So you've approved a set of projects that are going to pay out over a course of 3 or 4 years. We use phase in and phase outs to true that up with how much limitation is needed in the particular biennial budget time. That's kind of a brief where we're at today. Any questions?
We ready to dive in? Okay. And I'm going to tee you up, Paul, with a question. So we heard from Mr. Kim, and we're talking about the geotechnical piece. Is that all included in your request, and how does that factor into our needs as we go forward too? So I know it's a little bit of an offshoot, but just want to, I know they talk about capacity, and we're talking about.
Yeah, I'll get to in my, Paul Mather, Highway Division Administrator, I'll get to, as I go through my overview, I'll talk about our additional positions that we're going to be requesting in the next biennium for House Bill 2017 projects. In there is built in that model they talked about, the 70% outsourcing and the 30% in-house. And then we have processes internally, as David described, that split those positions up between the various regions and headquarters, and then between the various disciplines. And so the work that that subgroup is that they were talking about is doing will inform that discussion of where those positions go.
So that's the 42?
That's the 42 that's in my presentation. It's on top of, we've had 111 so far, so if you go back to the original ask when the bill passed, we had 39, and then this last session we had 111. And then to complete that for the funds that have been approved so far, our ask is for 42 additional positions. There'll be additional asks when we hit the triggers for additional, I should say there's potential for additional asks, we'll see. Potential for additional asks and additional bienniums when we hit the triggers for the additional positions needed. For example, Rose Quarter is money that's bonded later on. If we hit the triggers, those positions for that project are not included in what we've asked for so far. Good. So, Madam Chair, member of the Commission, I'm just going to quickly walk through my program. In your packet is a handout. Each one of us will be utilizing that maybe in a little different way, but I'm just going to hit some highlights from that presentation. I will say, just as a caveat for you, normally when I'm up here talking, I'm talking in federal language, and so today I'm going to be talking in state language. So there's a little different nuances. So we talk, for example, and when I get to the limitations, normally we talk in fix-it and enhance terms. When we go to state budget limitations, those turn into, rather than enhance, for example, we talk about modernization, and they really mean the same thing, but one's in one language, one's in the other language. You talk about positions and FTEs, you know, we've had that discussion before. That's part of when you get into kind of the state budget language that we're going to be talking in. So I just give that as a caveat as we go into this. The highway portfolio, or ODOT, operates and manages approximately 8,000 miles of highway throughout Oregon. State highways comprise of a little more than 11% of the total road miles and carry about 58% of the traffic and more than 20.7 billion vehicle miles per year. A strong economy needs good highways. The Highway Division is made up of two basic programs, Maintenance and Operation Program and then the Construction Program. Our Highway Maintenance and Operation Program includes the daily activities of maintaining and operating a highway system to keep them safe and usable. Highway maintenance activities include filling potholes, repairing drainage, mowing, plowing snow, and various other activities. Highway maintenance also includes responding to catastrophic events and keeping roads open and safe in passage during major events such as snowstorms, floods, and major wrecks. The construction program includes transportation projects that are approved in the STIP. These program areas include preservation, bridge program, modernization program, and our safety and operations programs. Two other limitations that we have are the local government limitation. This is where the federal funds that we pass through, the local governments pass through our budget. They reside in the local government limitation. And then special programs. It's kind of the catch-all. It includes things like the snow park program as well as things like my salary are in there and various other things that are included there. Kind of the changes over the last 6 years, you've tracked those along with us, and just the completion of the OTIA program. The JTA program will be wrapping up this summer with our last two projects, the project in Tillamook and the project on Highway 62 in Medford. And as you've heard us talk over the last several months, we're really ramping up in new and different ways to implement the House Bill 2017 projects. Also in here you'll notice the positions, a total of 192 positions in the first two bienniums of what we're asking for positions to deliver those projects, and then an additional $20 million on the maintenance side. So as I said before, we've received 111 of those plus the 39, so the 42 is what the specific number is in this particular request. Some of the things we're doing to contain cost and improve our program delivery. 3D design, this is where we take the data that lives in our designers' computer-aided drafting machines and transfer those directly to the construction machinery out there on the job and eliminate surveying and increase efficiencies. We also are rapidly implementing our e-construction, or our paperless environment for our construction folks, establishing tablets for our inspectors and be able to receive approvals in hours rather than weeks or in sometimes months to speed projects up. You will hear about next month our winter maintenance strategy, which will include some of the new equipment that we're using to be more efficient, as well as our use of salt in very strategic areas. I've talked to the Commission in the past about our work that we've done with ODF&W to improve our efficiencies around culverts. As I've noted earlier with the Commission, we've just extended that agreement and anticipate continued savings and efficiencies in that program. In Highway, we have two proposed policy packages. The first one is those 42 positions that I've been talking about. The second one is relative to the state radio program. The state radio program lives within my division. It's a project that we delivered as a project, but what we're asking for here is an ongoing funding stream to prevent us from being in that situation that got us to where we were several years ago in having to do a major overhaul of the program. So it's similar to our STIP, where we have a fix-it and modernization component. It's the same kind of thinking here, to just acknowledge that that system needs to be an ongoing maintenance as well as enhancements to that system. The last two policy option packages are maintenance stations. These are on the coast, and they're consistent with the triage strategy that we've talked about here before in our seismic response. These would be two maintenance stations that we would replace, that are on our schedule for replacement. We would take some of the seismic money that came from House Bill 2017, and we do kind of supersizing those maintenance stations and putting extra capacity for fuel, for supplies that are going to be needed on the coast. So we've got those kind of supplies at the forward end of where the needs are, and not worrying about transporting some of those basic building blocks that we're going to need to build the infrastructure back up afterwards. So those are the four policy packages that we have. On the last sheet, you'll see just a breakdown of the budget and the positions as they break out between the various limitations that I was describing. So that's a quick overview.
Paul, when do we start rolling out the solicitations for those 42 additional positions?
These 42 positions are actually a request right now in our budget for next biennium. So this is the start of the process for those 42. It will have to go through the governor's budget and then through the legislative process. So at the earliest, we would be, a year and a half from now time frame before we would be going out for those 42. We just received the 111, so we're actively out there with the 111 right now, moving on filling those positions. So just the recruitment process, the reason we staggered them the way we did, just we know it's going to take us a while to get those positions established. We know that a certain percentage of those are going to be promotions within the agency. That's going to take us some time to fill then those positions. So we staggered them in a way that I think made sense to us. Also, those 42 positions are going to be heavy on the construction inspection side, since we know that's going to be kind of the back end of the process, where the first 39 positions were more in the planning and design end of the process.
And since I've heard a lot of you guys indicate how challenging it is in terms of competition in the private sector right now, how does that tie into the recruitment strategy with other state agencies, neighboring states and whatnot? Is that kind of the more narrowed focus when you're looking for outreach to build up staff?
Well, Commissioner Simpson, we have a lot of challenges in not just the neighboring states that we're competing with for those positions. Private consulting firms as well as local governments are also actively competing for those same positions. So far in our recruitment process, we've been fairly good at meeting our needs in all of our regions except the Portland area is where we've seen the most challenges and where the most competition is, and we're probably the most challenged from a salary standpoint in competition, and just the cost of living is that much higher, and so we're as a state agency we're more challenged in the Portland area.
So going back to the question around the geotechnical piece, we have a state geotechnical position. So is there a way, when we have a void within our capacity, it seems like we'd want to add that sooner rather than later. If that's captured in the 42, we might be a year and a half before we start to do that hiring. Is that the best course, or is there?
Well, yeah, Madam Chair, I think I would recommend we wait to see what the recommendations are from our work group. I think we've got some pretty bright folks there that are going to figure out some ways to reassign some positions we have already and some duties we have that will get us to a much better place in the short term, and then as we add positions and add workload, we'll be able to refine and build from there. But I'm anticipating some great work from them, and they'll solve this problem well ahead of when we get these 42 positions.
Okay, very good. Thank you. I trust your confidence in that.
So, Paul, to what extent are the new hires going to be involved in managing the outsourced work? Or, because I've asked about this before, and given our increasing reliance on outsourcing, it becomes increasingly incumbent on the agency to be able to manage the outsourced work and the people who are doing it. So talk to us for a minute about that.
So the outsourcing will be done largely by a position that we call the consultant project managers that manage that outsourced work. We have a cadre of those already, and we're going to be expanding on those. What we're seeing so far in our recruitments, that many of the people that are filling those new positions come from within ODOT, so many of them already have experience in our processes, maybe not in the full breadth of the job, but in many aspects of the job they've demonstrated proficiencies in those. We do hire some people from outside, but from a competition standpoint, those are probably the positions that all of us are kind of fighting over the most. If you look at local governments, the private sector, as well as the neighboring states such as Washington, That 10-year seasoned project manager is a very sought-after position, partly because of the recession. If you think back 10 years ago, those are the people coming out of school and they couldn't find jobs, and so they found jobs in other sectors or in other areas, and so it's a huge void that's kind of in the market right now, and so we're having to come up with ways to kind of create those people and grab experience from other ways and apply it here. So as Steve and David talked to you earlier, going through our manuals and reestablishing those and going through a training program from those folks are going to be vital.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mather.
Thank you.
All right, I think I'm up next. Jerry Bohard, Transportation Development Division Administrator. I think you'll find that my budget's a little bit different. In fact, you might even notice the title was a little bit different. It says Transportation Program Development. And so I think probably unique compared to the folks sitting at this table. And if you had a chance to look at the organizational chart, you'll see that while total is a little over 220 FTE, about a third of them are actually in the Highway Division, and the remainder are actually in TDD. So while I have managerial responsibility for the folks in TDD, I have budgetary responsibility for some of the folks that are under Paul's management responsibility or his manager. So as I go through my presentation, I'll sort of highlight some of those differences. I think the other thing to note, and you'll probably hear this from Mr. Gephardt, is that I think that everything that happens in TDD in some shape, manner, or form, I touch all the other divisions. Troy Costales spent a lot of time safety, crash information. The same with motor carrier, certainly with regards to freight, a lot of overlap there. While Hal and I share a building, I think you just had a presentation today, the OPTP showing the partnership and the planning work that we do there. So you can really see how what we do connects to the rest of the agency in a different way than administratively. So I'm going to just sort of walk through sort of our four major areas of responsibility. The first and really the largest we call data analysis and research, and this is really where the majority of our FTE are. And it really accounts for a little over a quarter of my budget. It has very diverse work there, so transportation modeling. We've had a lot of conversation, I think, around GHG, the performance measures. Some of that work happens in transportation modeling. It's actually where the agency's research program is located within TDD. And then the transportation data section. This is where most of our federal reporting responsibilities lie. And if we don't get those done correctly, those are really the areas that in order to be compliant for federal funds. So this is where we keep all of our road inventory. It's where the traffic counting is accounted for. It's where our mapping GIS is located. Crash coding, so fatalities, our crash, all of that information is there. And I think what's really more important about this is that this is really the place where we're storing the data, providing the reports, all of the things that are necessary, I think, really for Paul's portfolio in particular. Asset management, so the actual data collection with regards to the condition of the system. So whether you're talking about bridge inspection, the pavement condition, those are all happening with staff that are located really probably under David Kim's responsibility, but they're actually funded through my budget. So that's sort of what's going on with analysis and data. The other really big one is STIP development and sort of program oversight. So again, this is a place where it's sort of a shared responsibility. I think that Jeff Flowers has been up here before, so he has the responsibility of making sure that the STIP is compiled, and also making sure that he's really the conduit to federal highways, obligating the funds, closing out the projects, all of the financial aspect associated with the STIP. In fact, sort of the positions that we got additional positions for him, aligning with sort of the project delivery schedule that Paul and his staff had put together. Also within STIP development, each of the regions have STIP coordinators, and they have folks that are actually sort of scoping out each of the projects that go into the STIP. So I have Jeff's staff that are in this budget, and then I also have the region staff that are doing the STIP part within this budget as well. Also with here is also the responsibilities for the other programs. We had a little bit of conversation about FLAP, I think. So that program management responsibility is located here. I know it will make Chair Boehne squirm a little bit, but all the CMAQ responsibilities are part of this budget as well. And then statewide and regional studies. So again, sort of that shared responsibility with the regions. So the OPTP, great example of the type of planning work that we do at the statewide level with our modal plans. It's also where the Transportation Growth Management Program is, which is a partnership with our sister agency, DLCD. So we're at headquarters sort of responsible for that long-range planning. But at the region where we have a number of planning staff, they're the ones that are working with the local governments, doing our local transportation system plans or doing our local facility plans. You've all adopted interchange area management plans, those types of things. So again, that relationship between TDD and the regions. We also actually fund other planning efforts through this disparity study, which is a responsibility of civil rights. It's actually funded through this budget as well. So again, sort of touching all parts of it. Sort of the biggest part of the budget, which people probably don't recognize, is transportation system projects. So right now that really is the Connect Oregon program. So that's about 48% of the budget. So we actually sort of go through a process trying to get a sense of how many projects we're going to complete in any biennium. And just as a FYI, since the inception, we funded 282 projects. I think, as you recall, you get a status of that in the quarterly report that you get. And right now, we're really working on projects out of Connect 5 and Connect 6. Obviously, we're, and we've had presentations on this, working on the dedicated projects that have been identified in House Bill 2017. So when I think about our program, I think about some of the budget drivers. Obviously, House Bill 2017, Safe Routes to School, really supporting highway in what they're needing to get done. But the other is really a lot of changes that have happened with regards to federal regulations. Again, we sort of had that conversation around some of the changes we're having to make in our planning program. A couple of months ago, you had the amendments to the freight plan again in order to address some new federal regulations. So I'll close with sort of our policy option package. So we're also asking for 2 additional positions, again aligning with the 40 some odd that Paul has identified in highway. So again, so we can provide that financial support. And then we've actually identified sort of a placeholder for Connect Oregon. So I think if you all recall, out of House Bill 2017, there are not enough funds for the 4 dedicated projects, regardless of sort of what happens with the privilege tax. And I think also just the conversation that has been happening, the recognition that there hasn't been a competitive program. So we just sort of put that in to see what might happen from the governor's standpoint. So with that, I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Great job. Okay, please.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Commissioners. My name is Troy Costales. I'm the Administrator of the Transportation Safety Division for ODOT. Walking you through the Safety Division's budget, first would let you know that for the Safety Division, we have one goal, one number, that is 0. And in our 2 programs, whether that's looking inward towards our organization from the employee safety point of view and our vendors and contractors point of view of 0 incidents, 0 injuries, we also carry the responsibility for the highway safety program on all roads and streets across the state, particularly on the behavioral side of highway safety. We look at our efforts in relationship to areas such as risky behaviors. Those are the actions or activities that people may get themselves involved with, whether, again, it's the employee safety side or the highway safety side. Our programs are involved in training, education, outreach, and awareness. We concentrate in areas where there is known risk, as Bohart had mentioned from the crash data side. We use that extensively in our highway safety work, but then we also rely on Mr. Gephardt's part of the organization related to workers' comp claims and injuries or near misses, things from Mr. Mather's part of the portfolio related to the maintenance activities and the exposure of those personnel on the road. Our job is to reduce that risk and increase that awareness. The office is very small but quite mighty in what we work on within our area, and divided up into three main programs: the Office of Employee Safety, the Highway Safety Section, and then our operations and oversight, the administrative piece of our division. Recent changes within our office predominantly are from internal reorganization. When the Office of Employee Safety left the director's office and became part of the safety division a few years ago, it takes a while for the budget cycles to catch up, and so this is a budget cycle where now you see the shift from one part of the organization to the other. And then legislatively, in 2017, legislature stepped out and wanted to put in place oversight responsibility for the ignition interlock devices that are placed in vehicles for impaired driving offenders around the state. There's been no oversight of that program of the vendor side for about 30 years. And the legislature looked at Washington State Patrol, recognized what they had, and said, we want to copy that. And so asked us to step in and get that started this biennium, and then on July 1 of 19, that program will then shift over to the Oregon State Police. So you see in the budget area an increase of temporary staffing of 3 FTE to get that program up and running, and then the FTE go away in 1921 because the whole program shifts over to the Oregon State Police. Our budget description is quite simple. We have the funds that run the office and the funds we use to deliver our programs in the field. The operations side is our staff, including 1 FTE in every one of the 5 ODOT region offices that are available to local communities and cities and counties. This is the fund that helps us with our 3 governor-appointed committees: the Oregon Transportation Safety Committee, the Governor's Advisory Committee on DUII, and the Governor's Advisory Committee on Motorcycle Safety, which is meeting right now in Salem for their quarterly meeting. This covers our statewide services costs, things that we may do when we put on a training program, where we create resources for all the staff and all the divisions of the agency to be able to access through the automated iLearn system, or in some cases videos or other options for them to be able to do around employee safety. This is where our media outreach program, billboards, radio, TV, our online social media presence, our supplies for things like Safe Routes to School, where we may be helping with statewide campaigns, Walk and Bike to School Day, or Walking School Bus. We'll provide incentives and programs to local communities because we can buy them in bulk much cheaper than doing 50 individual $1,000 grants. We just do one bulk and pay for the shipping and get it out to everybody, and we save taxpayer money that way by taking that efficiency. And then also things like our driver education curricula. We make that available to all 75 plus locations in the state that are teaching driver education. This is where statewide operations, where we take care of things like the ignition interlock device program, but also the legislature changed the rules and regulations around distracted driving. And they created an expectation on us as an agency and then the safety division to put in place a course that a judge could offer a first-time offender for distracted driving to go to a course, still would have a conviction, would still be sent to Mr. McClellan's shop and placed on the individual's driving record, but the individual can get the training, and the court can offer them, instead of the fine, they can go to the course instead. Well, we took care of that and set up that process and rule that you adopted a few months ago for the courts to be able to use. And this is also our area where we have oversight of all of our funding. We have 21 different fund accounts within the safety division, and we have different masters for every one of those accounts, and so we make sure that we are following the rules and regulations. In fact, next week, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration is spending all week in our office doing a review of all of their funds, and they are required to do that every 3 years. The largest portion of the budget is the field programs. We have 25 topical areas in the highway safety side of the house, and then 5 within the employee safety side of the house. These are grants that we give out for training. You see them quite often for enforcement, overtime enforcement, local community projects. The Vision Zero plans that you hear quite a bit about, those are funded from this side of the safety division budget. This is where the driver education program reimbursement that subsidizes the cost for teens to take the course, and also the motorcycle training program subsidizes the cost for individuals to take that course as required by law. Both those programs, we have a great administrative relationship with Mr. McClellan's office, that someone passes the driver education course or the motorcycle training course under law, the ability to say that meter exceeds what they would otherwise would have been tested at a DMV field office, and that in turn saves as an incentive and a savings within the DMV program within the field offices around the state. Other than this, the moving in of the ignition interlock program and then out, because it's the temporary only through June 30th, that's the only major budget driver. We have no policy option packages with the Safety Division for this upcoming biennium. With that, Madam Chair, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Very thorough, thank you.
Chair, many members of the Commission, Hal Guard, Rail and Public Transit Division. As some of you may recall, up until 6 years ago, we were two separate divisions. We maintained two separate limitations just for ease of bookkeeping and clarity across the branch. So I'm going to do this in two separate hops, and then I will kind of lump major changes and budget drivers at the very end of this. So starting with rail, 4 major program areas. There's rail safety. This is our FRA certified program where we backfill or assist FRA safety inspectors on heavy rail across the state. We inspect 2,377 miles of heavy rail on an annual basis, as well as look at all, not all, but we try to look at as much hazardous material shipment, motive power and equipment, signals and train control, as well as operations with the heavy freight statewide, solely focused on the safest operation of that system within the state. We also have a state safety oversight program. This is the light rail version of our safety improvement or our safety oversight program. It's done under the auspices of FTA as opposed to FRA, but we have borrowed an awful lot of the FRA program, standing that program up. We'll get more on that in a moment. But for Crossing Safety Program, we are responsible for authorizing 2,400 public rail crossings statewide. We have a lesser minor responsibility for 2,400 private crossings statewide. That's primarily ensuring appropriate signage, but our regulatory authority is slightly more limited at the private crossings than it is with public crossings.
And is all of that with the 4 that we hired, or what is the team comprised of?
Now you got me off track. That's okay.
Sorry,
that's just
so
fine.
If you're thinking
no,
of
we
the
hired,
rail safety and the crossing safety.
Chair Vaney, one major changes that we've done in the last 6 years is we've hired 4 additional FRA inspectors, and that was to augment our ranks so that we had redundancy in disciplines in response to statewide concern over shipment of hazardous material, primarily crude oil. So that those 4 new inspectors are on that heavy rail side of the ledger. We also hired 3 additional folks to help stand up our state safety oversight program, which is the light rail safety component, which we were mandated to set up under FTA rules. And I will touch on that a little bit in terms of how that's been evolving. Finally, we have rail operations and planning. This is everything else we do in rail. So this is everything from managing our EIS for enhancement and development of passenger rail services, overseeing our FRA rail improvement projects. Other things hit my limitation that are not reflected in this work, such as money that's been appropriated from the legislature to the Coos Bay Rail Link. We try to do a minor level of project management oversight for that. We administer our state owned rail right-of-way program, as well as the Salem Station, which is owned by the state, and our newly completed multimodal center there. And then, of course, the majority of that budget, about $29 million of biennium, goes to our passenger rail operations that we operate jointly with Washington State. That's kind of fast oversight of those programs for rail. For the transit side of the world, again, 4 major programs. They're comprised of both state and federal contributions. By far and away, the largest is the General Public Transportation Transit Program. That has been greatly increased by the addition of the state transportation improvement funds that came to us. We have our intercity program, approximately $4 million a biennium, providing connections between communities that aren't served by other forms of public transportation. Our enhanced mobility and special transportation program, STF, you might have heard us call that, but that's really special transportation needs. And then finally, our public transit planning and research program, and that's really our efficiency in helping other folks get ready to develop or improve the services that they currently have. Major changes over the last 6 years for us. There have been many. and they've been rapid. One, we became one division instead of two. With that came a lot of advantages, certainly sharing resources, certainly having grant experts help us with rail grants where we hadn't worked together before, having transit experts to help us stand up our brand new state safety oversight program. A couple words on that. That was a new mandate. We have completed all of our requirements, including achieving the statutory fixes that were required by FTA in order to be able to be compliant. All of our materials have been submitted, and we are simply awaiting final certification, which gives us all of our authority, including our ability to levy fines or take equipment out of service if required. So that basically gives us our law enforcement badges once that is certified by FTA. Other major changes, of course, is the STF. We have been awarded 7 additional FTA to stand up that program. 3 will be available to us after the 2019 session, or not session, but after 2019. We are currently recruiting for 4 to help us finish setting up that program. As this commission's well aware, we have completed our rule work and we are busy putting together program guidance. Other major drivers, we have been working hard. We receive $10 million in general fund for passenger rail operations. That has been a concern because we've not been able to maintain that operation based upon the dedicated funds that we have within the department. That's really come to us through some changes in federal law as well as us purchasing equipment. It's been a little harder slog since we had a major derailment last December. We've been working very, very hard with Amtrak to make sure that our state is not receiving additional fiscal impacts as a result of that derailment. We were looking forward to 2 additional round trips that Washington was going to put in place between Seattle and Portland, which was going to align with schedule changes that we put in place that would give us a little better efficiency and hope to increase ridership. With the abandonment of the Point Defiance bypass until positive train control is in place, those additional round trips are not there. Our smart accounting people are sharpening their pencils and basically trying to calculate as much as possible what is the lost revenue from ridership, potential increased ridership, from any of the operational impacts that we've had as a result of that derailment. And those conversations are ongoing, but we have had very clear assurances from Amtrak that we will be made whole. So hopefully we will not be seeing fiscal impacts, but we aren't realizing the efficiencies that we'd like to. We are struggling with the loss of equipment with 1 completely destroyed train set. We are down to 6 trains currently in rotation. We are busy working to make sure that all of our equipment is PTC, positive train control compliant. So that's a major effort that we're going. Our train that was damaged in July is back in service and is PTC compliant. Our other train is currently getting its PTC installed and should be back in service in another 2 weeks. So with that, I will take any questions.
I thank you for the added detail on the passenger rail. So if you'll recall, we've had some questions by senators with some real interest in how we make that pencil. And I just want to make sure that we get ahead of that and that that story is told to the legislature so that we don't end up having some questions about that division and, that service where we're penalized for things that are outside our control, but also that it appears that we were not aware that we had a part of our system that really has not been sustainable in terms of funding for a number of years. So not sure how we want to articulate that or how that'll be done next week, but I think it's an important point just to make sure that we're ahead of it versus behind it. So great.
Good afternoon, Chair Boehne, Commissioners. My name is Amy Ramsdell. I'm the Motor Carrier Division Administrator. Our 294 employees are dedicated to regulating the trucking industry. We do that collaboratively with them. We're broken into 4 main sections, and if it's all right with you, I'd like to just cover the document section by section. Our staff in our federal safety section do inspections roadside and at carriers' places of business. Over the last year, we've seen over a quarter of our staff retire, and we anticipate at least another 4 or 5. We, much like Hal, have to get training from the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration's National Training Center. That means that our travel and training costs have gone up substantially this last biennium, and we continue to see that rising in the next biennium. We have seen an increase in truck at fault crashes over the last several years as a result of that. One of our main budget drivers is setting aside $500,000 to partner with local law enforcement. We have them focused on the top 5 causes of truck at fault crashes, which are speeding, tailgating, failure to remain in one's lane, unsafe lane changes, and improper turns. We have 31 state and local partners, and we're also partnering with OSU to study the effects of that law enforcement approach on truck at fault crashes. We had been increasing our truck inspections, but we just didn't see the numbers go down. That is one of our key performance metrics for the division. And so we are really grateful for the help that we also get from Oregon State Police, who are one of our non-compensated partners. We also are responsible in that section for the green light system. This is our way in motion system, where trucks that have transponders in them are able to communicate with our infrastructure. We can keep them out on the highway, and we can check their safety scores and their weights all while they're in motion. Those systems were installed over 20 years ago. They're aging and they're in need of either repair or replacement. So we have set aside funding for that in our current and future budgets. And then also, this past year, as an efficiency, we did partner with Prepass and Help Inc. to allow their transponders interoperability with our system. And I also, we're very, very close to partnering with their competitor, DriveWise. And so we have seen a 100% increase in our registered vehicles that are using transponders. They're up from the first of the year at 25,000 vehicles to 50,000 vehicles that are now in our way in motion system. Our motor carrier enforcement officers are working at 84 fixed stations. That makes up our field services section. That includes our 6 ports of entry. Those facilities, many of them are over 50 years old. With the help of Central Services staff, we've identified at least $1.4 million in the next biennium that will need to be allocated to improving those structures. We are looking for ways to reduce that. We did our first ever comprehensive baseline of all of our facilities to see, are they efficient and effective, and do we need to continue to have those buildings, or can we decommission them and use a portable motor and carrier enforcement site? So we hope to bring that number down a little bit. And also we're looking to install a secondary bypass system at all of our ports of entry, where we have a license plate reader and a way in motion detector for all of the vehicles that choose to not use the transponder system. At our Woodburn port of entry, we've installed this in our southbound location. It allows us to pre-screen trucks at either highway speed or slightly reduced speeds, and it's about 66% of all the weighings we do. Staff in our Salem Motor Carrier Services and our audit compliance sections are responsible for registering motor carriers for both intra and interstate operations. They collect weight mile tax and registration fees to the tune of about $50 million annually in registration fees and over $300 million in weight mile tax. And those staff work 20 hours a day, down from 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We found that we just did not have the transaction volumes to support the midnight to 4 a.m. shift. And so we have moved them to our 7 to 5 shift to better respond to the industry's needs. And so that's also reducing some of our overhead costs because we're not providing lighting and utilities. We've also recently installed a new phone system. It went well. We've taken advantage of every available customer service-based enhancement that we can have to have a state-of-the-art call center. We do anticipate that this will bring efficiencies there, and hopefully we can reallocate those staff to looking for ways to innovate our services, put more things online, and move towards a more electronic data sharing. That's something we see on the horizon. Both the International Fuel Tax Agreement and International Registration Plan passed ballots this last year to allow motor carriers to display their credentials electronically starting in 2019. And so we will be working with law enforcement partners to do a lot of training and outreach over the next year. We've also talked about developing a real-time app for our law enforcement partners. And that will help them check the motor carrier status to make sure all of their accounts are in good standing. And so our auditors travel all around the nation, and they conduct audits at all motor carriers' places of business. To do this efficiently, we wait and pull a bunch of accounts in one zip code area so that we're visiting a multitude of motor carriers when we send our auditors out of state. We did achieve a record $7 million in additional weight mile taxes identified this last year, up from our usual $5 to $6 million. Our audit staff are getting more data. We have data now from OSP citations, and we're also looking to partner with local law enforcement to get their citation data to identify those places where we see motor carriers. We're also working on an automated risk tool to identify carriers who have a high likelihood of not being in compliance with weight mile tax payments. And we're using some information from California's Taxing Bureau to help us learn from the good work that they did. In House Bill 2017, we received 12 positions. We are actively recruiting for 2 auditors in the Portland area, but much like our partners in the Highway Division, we are struggling to get people, so we're doing some more outreach, and we're also posting the jobs on our IRP and IFTA websites, hoping that maybe we could lure somebody to the state of Oregon from one of our peers. And then we're also staffing up our mobility program. For many years, it has been added duties to our over-dimension permit unit, but with the increase in construction projects, we recognize that we need a program to work collaboratively with our partners in the Highway Division, general contractors, as well as the freight industry to help balance that safety of the work zones with the efficient movement of freight in Oregon. It was something that dates back to the OTIA 3 program. That's when we started the mobility program. And like then, the roads are going to be under a significant amount of construction, and I do see our staff doing a lot of training with new employees, but also with new motor carrier representatives as they come on board, and they're changing, and the faces are changing there just like within our division. And I do also just want to call out on page 3 under major changes when it talks about our household goods regulatory program. I really want to commend that program manager. The work that she's done over the last year really embodies our vision as how we need to behave as regulators. We used to do the heavy-handed sting approaches and set up a move with our law enforcement partners to catch illegal movers. We kept seeing the same people, but we didn't see the number of registered carriers going up. And so now she has reached out to the real estate agents, nursing homes, and other industries that see and use a lot of household goods movers. And through that education approach, we've seen a 400% increase in registered household goods carriers. And so with that, that's the end of my presentation, and I'll take any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Moving right along here. Madam Chair, members of the Commission, my name is Tom McClellan. I'm a DMV administrator. I'm going to start by reading our mission vision type of stuff, because I think it really sets the tone for who and what DMV represents. DMV promotes driver safety, protects financial and ownership interests in vehicles, and collects revenue for Oregon's multimodal transportation system. We do a lot of other things besides that, but you can kind of encompass the bulk of what we do in that three-legged stool, basically, and those responsibilities. Our vision, to be nimble, easily accessible, and recognized for serving customers through innovation, efficiency, and dedicated employees. We boil that down into a service model exceeding expectations, one customer at a time. Each interaction that our employees have is an opportunity to exceed expectations, and that's either in a field office or on the phone or over the internet, even through the mail. So we also have guiding principles that we use the acronym PACE, and it stands for Public Service, Amazing Quality, Customer Focus, and an Engaging Workplace. Those are the things we really strive to have, and we're making a lot of progress actually in those particular areas. We do a lot of things. And so in our driver program, we have 3.1 million driving privileges that are active right now, 3.3 million passenger vehicles, 1.3 million other vehicles, just over 2,000 dealers
new and used car dealers that we're responsible for licensing and regulating. From law enforcement, record requests, over 60 million record requests come in each year, and about 2.5 million other requests from other requesters. Driver license issuances, about 600,000 per year. Vehicle registrations, about 1.9 million per year. Titles, it's about 1.1 to 1.2 million, so about 100,000 per month of vehicle titles that we're issuing on a regular basis. 60 field offices across the state, not all open Monday through Friday, but 60 opportunities for people to do business with us in person. About 3 million customer visits each year, and some of those are repeat visits, so if somebody didn't quite have what they needed when the first time, but those visits are counted, and so a little over 3 million of those. Yeah, that's right. We don't charge per day or anything, or issue passes or anything. A lot of goals for us: improving driver safety, having convenient access, having a diverse and inclusive workplace, being as efficient and accurate as we can be in the recording of those financial and security interests around vehicles. Protecting customer information, very, very important for us, because we have a lot of personal identifiable information because of the nature of our business. And so I often tell our new employees that it's kind of like coming to work at a bank, and you have the code to the vault. And our vault is not necessarily money, although we do collect a lot of money. It's the information that's there that's actually very valuable, and people lose their jobs over inappropriate release of that type of information. So it's a very important piece of what we do. Using performance and service level measures for our decision making, we track a lot of things that we do and how long it takes. Another goal is achieving operational efficiencies versus using targeted technology investments, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a minute. And then finding ways to maximize the revenues for Oregon's state highway fund and for local governments as well. We have several programs. Our driver program covers a lot of different things, but the biggest ones are driver licensing, which you would obviously think of, but also the management of the privilege that goes with that driving license. So the suspension of driving privileges, the reinstatement of driving privileges, withdrawal of driving privileges, limits on when people can drive. Those are all things that we're responsible for putting in place. Vehicle titling and registration, fraud prevention and detection. Again, back to that identity theft, identity issues, and protecting information. That's a very important focus for us. And we don't have a large group. We have about a 3 or 4 person fraud prevention group that helps train and inform our managers and responds to concerns that are raised. We have a fraud emergency warning system that by email, if something is identified in one field office, it's pushed out to the other offices so they can look for some irregularities that might be happening, particular individuals. So that's one example. We also, like I said, license and regulate businesses. So these are mostly dealers, the franchise new car dealers, and the larger number used car dealers, dismantlers, driver training schools. Those are businesses that we're responsible for licensing and overseeing. I consider public records a program for us as well, and we are constantly receiving requests for information that people have a right to receive, and sometimes they don't have a right to receive, so we have to determine when they're eligible to receive that. And then a more recent program for us is our service transformation program, and it has a shelf life. We've said up to 10 years and $90 million for us to really transform the way we operate as an organization and replace very, very old mainframe computer systems. And that's, I'll tell you more about that, but we're a long ways into that, long ways down the path. That's a kind of an overarching program for us, is our service transformation program. I listed a few, under budget factors. These are probably more macro type things, but the demographics of Oregon definitely has a role or impact upon us. Obviously, population growth and the in-migration of people into Oregon means more business for us. So more workload, more customer visits, more transactions that we're responsible for. The diversity of the people we serve, the different languages that we're responsible for interacting with customers, and the translation and interpreting that we have to do with that. There's complexity that comes with that. Probably more an increase in impairments as well, which somewhat goes with aging, but not necessarily. And determining whether we need to remove someone's driving privilege because of impairments that they have, mental, physical, other types of impairments that prevent them from operating a vehicle safely. So we have responsibilities around that. Another budget factor has to do with kind of the management of the channels of service. So we think in terms of a field office as being a channel to deliver service. But so is online, so is through the mail, through the internet. There's different ways for us to deliver services, and trying to manage that both from our resources but also from investments in different areas to respond to what we think customers want, but also kind of the changing demographics of our state. Trying to push for more online registration renewals, vehicle registration renewals, and not going into a field office. What we found, just give you an example, when we introduced online vehicle registration renewals, as that has constantly grown by about 2% per year, it's become more and more of a share of the total. The mail has dropped, but the field office percentage has stayed about 33 to 35%. We can get people to not put postage on an envelope, but we can't get them to not go to a DMV office. So it's a real challenge for us to get that to happen. So figuring out ways to influence the choices people make of how they interact with us as well. I put down aging infrastructure. I just mentioned our old computer systems. When I say old, these are like 60s and 70s. Some of these systems were first written, and the newer ones were in the 80s. So they're still very, very old computer systems. 60 field offices, only 4 or 5 of them are actually owned by our agency. The rest are leased, which is a constant struggle. And we try to get 10-year, sometimes 20-year leases. But we have, I think it's 25 of our leases of the 60, of the 55 or so, coming due in the next year and a half to 2 years. And the challenges there are, we know we have a lot of change coming our way. Do we need more employees in the future? Fewer employees? Do we need bigger parking lots? Smaller lobbies? What's going to be our need? And do we lock in for a 10-year lease with that kind of unknown right now? And if you go for a shorter period of time, this is a budget factor, you tend to pay more. The landlords don't want to lock in for 3 years or 2 years. They want to lock in for a longer period of time and have that stability. So there's a lot of factors there and some challenges that we're going to be facing over the next few years just around the management of leases and the repair and upkeep of these facilities as well. So some of them are getting fairly old. And then we have our share of federal mandates. The most common one we have has to do with commercial driver licensing, which is the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration. Commercial driver license systems, there are standards that we have to meet across the country, and other states do as well, to have a CDL program. Constantly making changes to our computer systems and the way that we conduct testing for CDL applicants. We also have the Federal Real ID Act, and that is one of our packages that we are proposing. President signed that in 2005. They had like a 2 or 3 year plan to implement, and states are still implementing it. And until just last July, Oregon had a mandate that prohibition that we would not comply. Now we have a short period of time until we have to. Never mind, we changed our mind. And so now we have to get on the horse and get going to comply with that federal mandate. Major changes that have happened to us, I just put a few down here. One is accepting credit and debit cards, kind of a novel idea. We did that about 1.5 years ago in our field offices. Great success, a lot of positive reaction from the public from that, but they want to ask, now what? I'd like to pay with PayPal or take your pick, all the different ways you can pay these days, and so that's the next thing for us, another challenge for us. Microfilm. We still do some microfilming, not a lot, but about 1.5 years ago we got all our vehicle transactions to a digital imaging, and just last month finished with our driver documents. So now we're doing everything with digital imaging. So much more efficient, so much easier for our employees to access as well. Electronic convictions from the courts. We've worked with the justice and municipal courts, and recently now the state courts, the circuit courts, to send their conviction information to us electronically instead of through paper. And that gets into some of our efficiencies, but that's been a major change, and it's just gradually growing as more courts are able to come on board. We changed our vendor that does our electronic vehicle registration as an integrator and interface between the dealers and us. So when a dealer is selling a car, they can initiate that title registration work more efficiently. get the plates issued and to the customer as quickly as possible. So it's an interface that they provide for us and actually reduces some of our workload as long as the work is done accurately. We had a customer service task force a few years ago, had some legislators on it and several other people, and one of their recommendations was, well, first was replace all your computer systems, which really wasn't a big aha, but they also said you should post your wait times online. So we started to do that, and some people are actually checking that and looking ahead to say, hey, that office has a 25-minute wait time, but that one has a 10-minute wait time, and it's 5 minutes further for me to drive, so maybe I'll go to that one. It may actually be helping. We haven't actually done a study on that, but doing some balancing as far as the numbers of people that go to different offices because they can see what is the current wait time. So that's helpful. I mentioned some of the things we've done around cost containment. We had the same as other divisions. We had right sizing to eliminate positions. We've had span of control. We've had hiring freezes. We've had travel restrictions. All of those things done for the purpose of saving some money, being more efficient. We have several partnerships that we have in place that are very important to us. DEQ is one of those, so that when you do your vehicle emissions testing in the Portland area or down in Medford, you can also renew your tags. And that's been a very good partnership we've had with DEQ for many years. Another one I consider a partner is Troy in the Transportation Safety Division. He mentioned the driver education piece, which eliminates a test that people have to do when the teens have to do when they come to see us, but also Team Oregon is the same type of thing with motorcycle testing. It's a function we don't have to do. And so we're able to accept the certificate that they've completed that work. Has efficiencies for us. A lot of people don't know we have a relationship with the Department of Corrections to help the offenders who are in state prisons to obtain photo ID before they're released back into the community. Recognition several years ago that that's an important credential for people for getting a job, for getting a house, getting a loan, open a bank account, all those types of things. And many of them were releasing without that credential. So we've worked with Department of Corrections to be able to issue driver's license, but mostly ID cards to them. So a very good program we've had.
Only out of the state system?
Yes.
Okay.
We've had a few cities and counties contact us. We haven't yet put anything together for that. We have an agreement in place with the Oregon Youth Authority as well, but they haven't been able to take advantage of it quite yet, trying to figure out the logistics, but it's been mostly the state prisons. Let me just go right to our policy option packages. The first one is $30.5 million for our service transformation program. I think it's years 5 and 6 for us, toward that $90 million in total that we're spending. It includes, the package is $22 million in the base, the positions that are there in the base budget is 8.5, so total is 30.5. So a big part of the 90 million is going to be spent in that next 2-year period. We will go live with our new vehicle system in January 22nd of next year. So it'll be done this biennium. And then soon after, we'll start on our driver's system. And that's to be completed July 6th of 2020. A second package we have here, so we talked about outsourcing of services. Because we have bought a commercial off-the-shelf system from a private vendor, there is a software maintenance and support component to this. And that doesn't kick in until we've finished our rollout of the driver system in the summer of 2020. And the amount for that first year of that agreement is $3.6 million. That is at the richest level, the highest level of support. And we can phase that back over time as our staff learns more about the system and we're more comfortable with being able to operate with that new software. But there is a price tag associated with it, and it will grow. So it'll be 3.6 this next biennium, 7.6 because it'll be 2 years worth the following 2-year period. So it's an increase in our budget, and we need to get that established. Another package we have is for the Federal Real ID Act, $3.6 million. We're asking for 24 positions. Most of those are in our field offices because between July 6th of 2020 and when the deadline that the federal government has of October 1st of 2020 is about 3 months. And so there's going to be a lot of people coming in wanting and needing that credential that has a black star on it that shows it's a compliant card. But not everyone will come in that first 3 months. It's going to be continuous. We estimate that about 30% of our current driver license applicants will want a compliant card, primarily for accessing, getting through security at airports, TSA. Other reasons too, but mostly because of that. So there's an ongoing cost associated with it, because those transactions, we've checked with other states, are averaging about 8 minutes more per transaction for all the additional information and documents they have to present, and the imaging that we don't do today that we would have to do with those documents. There's time associated with it. So that's the cost. We're trying to offset that time with staffing so that our wait times don't go up too much as we go into that phase. And then the other package that we have is for our third-party drive test program. We've basically patched that one together over the years. Commercial driver license, CDL testers, and then commercial driver training schools. We've had about 1 FTE trying to support that outsourcing of that program. It's not enough. And we really need to expand more into our Class C or regular driver applicants so that we can use more of those businesses. So we're starting to roll that up into a larger, more fully functioning program. We're asking for 3 positions to help us with that, for inspectors and a trainer and things like that. Packages that were not, we were asked to identify packages that were not approved. One had to do with the reclassification of 13 of our field office manager positions, and the request was that we find savings within our own budget by eliminating other positions to do that. We actually are in the process of doing that right now. We've identified some positions to fund that, so we'll be able to, looks like we'll take care of that this biennium actually. Second one had to do with we called it facility security and access, and it included some ADA assessment that we did. We identified bathrooms that weren't ADA compliant, and areas that were too high or too short, and so we really need to make some improvements there. Plus a threat assessment that we did with the help of some retired state police detectives, looked at our facilities and said, you could make these changes and your facility would be more secure. First and foremost would be security or surveillance type cameras for our offices. So the direction there is to work within the agency's funding for capital improvement and emergency small business funding that's available to us, and hopefully we can get some of that funding to help us address those shortcomings. And the final one that was not approved is a lobby management or a queuing system. Many states have automated the way that the flow within field offices is handled, and there are systems that are very good as far as queuing people to different people, or is their skill level matching the employee's skill and their experience to the type of transaction the person comes in the office with, and it's a much more efficient flow. Kind of like Disneyland has done with the lines that they have. They figured out that if they just did it that way, they could get more people through. It's the same kind of concept, using queuing theory to be able to get more people through the office. Many of them also have ways to collect customer satisfaction information right there at the point of sale, if you will. So that funding was not approved. We'll probably look to the following biennium, maybe 21-23, to do that. And if we can't do it within our own funding, to have a package go forward at that time. That's all I had, and we'll take any questions you might have.
I have a question on the 24 for the Real ID. So you said you feel like a third will request that. You anticipate it being ongoing, but maybe not at that initial kind of startup. So are those limited duration positions, or are those?
We're proposing them as permanent because we think that 30% of people that are applicants, new applicants, will continue on into the future. That people new to Oregon, first-time drivers. Some will say, yeah, I need that, and others will say, no, I've already got a passport. I don't need it. So we're thinking that there'll be kind of a regular increase in the time it takes. It's really an offset to wait times, basically. We could probably do it without the positions in the future, but the time for each transaction is probably going to take longer, and then the queuing of the people in the office is going to get longer as well. So it's our way of trying to address that extra time per transaction to get the throughput at a level we think will help.
So every state will issue 2 different licenses? So you would have just a standard plain vanilla and one with a black star?
You will have an option. Not every state is providing an option.
Okay.
Some states, it's mandatory. The only card they will issue is a Real ID compliant card, but our legislature said, no, let's make it a choice.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's a legislative decision there for them as well.
We also have excuse me,
No.
we also have authority to, through administrative rulemaking, to assess a supplemental fee to recover the costs associated with implementing and ongoing delivery issuance of compliant cards. So there's another funding source to help offset that. So if we do have 24 permanent positions, we can continue to have like a $10, we haven't calculated what it's going to be yet, but $10 or $15 extra charge for those who choose to get the compliant card. They'll pay that, and that money would presumably go toward the costs associated with delivering those cards.
Is the Beaverton field office the busiest one in the state?
Most weeks.
Most weeks.
Not always, but most weeks.
And is there, I mean, and what is the threshold where we would like do another office, like set up one in Hillsborough or something, or is
We
that?
have Hillsborough.
We do?
Name a city,
okay,
we've got most of them. We don't have a threshold for that. A few of our offices could still take a few more people if we had the position authority. As we're ramping up this summer, actually, we're adding 32 limited duration positions throughout the field, and most of those actually are in that Portland metro area where we're going to deploy them, because that's where we're have the longest wait times, is in that area. And Beaverton, frankly, struggles the most with keeping up with the volumes that we serve. So it's very high.
Yeah, being able to track the wait times is a nice feature. But I've said this before, but for most people, this is their really most direct contact with government in any way, shape, or form, right? And everybody coming in here, even if they're not driving, they get their ID through DMV, and it's a really, so I think all the changes you're making are good, and it's actually fairly modest considering what you're doing, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Other questions or comments? Great job.
Well, good afternoon, Chair Baney and Commissioners. I know that I stand between you and the evening commute, so I'm going to make, it's Bob Gebhardt, Administrator for Central Services. Just give you a brief overview of the service portfolio. And one of the things that's kind of neat about going last is I get to hear and gain further appreciation for the support obligation we have, number one, but also the privilege it is to serve these administrators and manage a pretty diverse portfolio of offerings that requires a service infrastructure and a support ethic that we're working hard in Central Services to try to raise. The support services branches in Central Services division include business services, facilities, financial services, human resources, information systems, and the ODOT procurement office. Also in the Central Services limitation is headquarters, which the headquarters includes, let me get this situated. Headquarters includes the Office of Civil Rights, Audit Services, Office of Innovation, Communications, Legislative Budget Services, and the Government Relations sections that provide budget and policy development counsel and services to agency leadership and stakeholders. I won't go into a lot of the specific things that each of these branches and offices do, but I will say that given the fact that Central Services Division is affected by and serves all of ODOT, our primary driver for budget is the demands for quality support and service and counsel to the ODOT sister divisions. A significant factor we have to consider in all support services offerings is to continually upgrade and modernize technology systems and business processes to support ever-increasing emphasis on efficiency and data-informed decision-making. Another need is to attract and retain quality talent and a diverse workforce that's equipped to perform the new work required as a result of these new technologies and emphasis on big data and analysis. Recent and ongoing improvement efforts across the division include the procurement and facilities reviews that have come out of the DAS recommendations and the McKinsey review. The procurement review recommendations were presented to this commission in March, and a work plan has been developed in response and will be presented to the CIAC, a Continuous Improvement Advisory Committee, in an upcoming meeting. The facilities efficiency review report was submitted to ODOT on Tuesday, so we just received it. We're going to review it and prepare a response for presentation to the commission next month. Additional improvement effort that I'd like to highlight is work we're doing in the division in the creation and standing up of the Central Services Performance System, which seeks to instill a management discipline to strengthen engagement with ODOT divisions. and the partners we serve. This work includes establishing clear understanding of the division's service commitments and in alignment with ODOT mission, vision, values, and strategic direction, and the creation of performance metrics and review processes that foster disciplined performance management and continuous improvement. A list of a few cost-saving measures over the last few years is listed in the presentation materials, and we just continue to focus on opportunities to continue to save money, create efficiencies so that more money can find its way into the larger system, transportation system and other areas of programming that my peer administrators hold up. To wrap up, I'd like to offer just a few comments on a couple of policy option packages that are being put forward for consideration that are really created to abide by and implement two pieces of legislation other than House Bill 2017. They came out of the 2017 legislative session. The first package seeks to replace 4 of 7 cybersecurity and compliance positions that were transferred over to the state CIO under Senate Bill 90 in 2017. The agency needs to replace positions that must handle the security work that the Enterprise Security Office will not cover. Agency-specific tasks and functions like agency-level security risk management, local employee investigations, compliance reviews, and physical security systems. The second package seeks 3 positions necessary to implement House Bill 3361, which calls for the creation of a statewide data portal by the state's new chief data officer, as well as ongoing publishing of data by agencies pursuant to established standards and governance that will come from this new data officer. ODOT has thousands of agency data sets that will need to be reviewed for possible publication and managed in accordance with ODOT data governance practices that are in their formative stages. These requested positions will be necessary to aid in the establishment and management of standards and governance, as well as the ongoing publication and interpretation of new or revised standards and their affected data sets. I'll just wrap there and ask if there's any questions.
Well, you blazed right over some really great cost-saving measures. So I just want to make sure cost containment and program delivery. So I did read those and I'm impressed. So good to see some of these
well, thank you.
Ways in which to, and I know everyone added that too, but I know you're abbreviating. But do we have questions or thoughts, please?
Yeah, real quick, Bob. There was an area in here earlier, and I was looking, I had asked this question, I don't know, maybe a year and a half ago or so. I know we were probably down in Region 3 or something, or 4, far away. But I remember asking Angela when she was at the meeting about her office, whether or not she had adequate staff. And I don't see anything on here. Is there a reason why on your organizational chart there's nothing defined under her in terms of her staff support, for one? And two, as I looked at the KPMs, the line item pertaining to certified firms has performance status indicated as performance is getting worse. So, and I don't see any proposal for staff. So if we're going to improve in an area, how are we going to improve without adequate staff in order to change the performance from getting worse to getting better?
Yes, Commissioner Simpson, good questions. I would tell you that the Office of Civil Rights sits in the headquarters area, and that office reports directly to Director Garrett. And I spend time with Angela. One thing I know for a fact is she's had a considerable churn, and that's in the existing staff, and that has stabilized in recent months. She's got all positions filled, has an ongoing and active development path for each of the folks. I think there's a focus on the metrics that are in flight, and conversations within the larger community are very active. She maintains a very rigorous meeting schedule and is really active with stakeholder groups, and now has staff to cover those requirements. So I think things are trending better than I've seen, and I've only been here for a couple of years. So I think we're in a positive trending pattern, but I haven't taken a look at the data very recently.
And I think you may recall in House Bill 2017 there were 3 civil rights positions requested and we received. So that's where you would see the input of new positions coming in to, again, prepare us for the wave of opportunity that comes with the investments of that funding package as well. The certified firms are playing itself out on a couple different fronts. Remember, certification takes place over in Business Oregon. That's where that discipline transpires. The issue is it has decreased. So the question to us is, what do we need to do with our partners at Business Oregon? But also, Governor Brown has just recently issued an executive order that says if you're going to do business with the state, you need to be certified. So we're trying to move in a direction that with the opportunity, not only at the Oregon Department of Transportation, but the whole of the state enterprise, that if you want to conduct business with us, we encourage you to be certified. That way we can track it. So the flip side of that conversation is we've got to do a better job, again, working with Business Oregon to articulate what is the benefit of being certified. There's a reason people are moving backwards in terms of certified firms. Those are conversations that are wrapped up in this executive order that went on to me and my sister agencies to see if we can move up the numbers in terms of what I will term small business across the whole of the state of Oregon here. So the direction is clear. I think Angela and her folks are probably out in front of all state agencies in terms of animating and moving forward with the executive order that Governor Brown just issued. So.
Great, and I just personally, I think there's a better use of Angela's time as a manager, director of that department, as opposed to bouncing all around, having FaceTime all over the state. And I just wanted to make sure that there's adequate people in that office so that she can actually operate in a leadership capacity instead of being stretched all over the place. Because seeing her in so many different venues, like, wow, seems like that'd be really rough for somebody to be in so many different areas. And I understand that has to be a challenge because right now it's a hot market. The most concentrated area of firms are going to be in this region, Region 1. But at some point, the private market's going to slow itself down, and obviously a lot of the attention will divert to public agencies. And so I just want the department to be ready to take on some of those challenges that present itself, but also be able to work with our other constituents and partners to afford more opportunities for our local companies.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Simpson, I hear you. And I think, as Mr. Gebhardt indicated, we're in a better position now than we've been in the past. And we're asked to be a lot of places. So you were spot on, and I appreciate your observation, that our people are stretched thin. We are asked to make sure we carry the ODOT flag across the whole of the state, and we do that. And that does strain our people. I appreciate your acknowledgement of that. But that said, when we're asked to show up, we show up.
Well, y'all are very busy. I have a lot going on. And I really am thrilled to work with all of you, but also just to see the commitment and the passion and dedication to doing the right thing and making sure that you're asking for what your needs are. Didn't see anything in here that really gave me great pause. I'm sure we could be asking for more. But it sounds as though you're tempering that. We just were given an incredible infusion of funds within 2017, but with that also comes a lot of need to add our capacity to make sure that we can meet those requirements. So thank you for your kind of tempered approach. Daryl, did you get from us what you need? Is there anything you want to have as parting comments?
No, not really parting comments, just we'll be back in Lakeview in a month. The budgets probably will not be materially changing, but the numbers will change. We don't have final pension obligation bond numbers from DAS yet. There are a few other things outstanding from DAS we don't have. So while they won't be exactly the same numbers, but materiality, they should not be changing. So stay tuned. We'll see you in a month.
And I think like that, and I know Daryl was going to say this, but I cut him off. I think the more important question is, did you get what you need from us?
So we have access to the budget as well, and I know that we have access to Daryl and your team and any questions that we might have. The purpose of this is to give kind of a flyover for what it is that we will be asking for so that we're not caught off guard in case someone asks us. Also, kind of what the challenges are that you see within your departments, and I love that it's also peppered with the ways in which you're working to gain efficiencies and cut costs. So if I would leave it to the commission members, if there's more that you need, The resource is there, and so please ask or engage. But I don't know that we'll do another fully loaded anything. We'll just go forward with the budget as you've presented, with the additional amendments as they come forward. Is that all right with everyone? Okay, great.
Sounds good.
Okay. So with that, unless there's anything else for the good of the order.
No, Madam Chair, I think we've conducted and concluded our business for today, so thank you.
Okay. So I just would like to note that we are an hour early and we had niceties. So I want you to know that I'm working on it. Thank you. We are adjourned.
I'm impressed. I was the only one who wasn't nice.